Chapter 1. Erica Hayes had spent the better part of the weekend sending back the wedding gifts. Writing the apologies was the hardest part, and as much as she hated doing it, the truth was that she could not stand having gifts that reminded her of the wedding that was supposed to take place. She took a deep breath when she was done writing the last note and put it in the envelope. She never really did understand why the woman was always left to deal with the mess in the aftermath. She always wondered why it couldn't be the other way round. Maybe for once, men needed to have a taste of what life was like when the shoe was on the other foot. She sat down and sighed before switching on the TV. From the corner of her eye, she could see her phone screen blinking on and off. She had put her phone on silent mode and unhooked her house phone. She needed her space. She needed the silence. And it was better that way, because every time her phone would ring, it would be some person with heartfelt apologies about her wedding. And honestly, she'd heard enough of that already. As she sat there, she thought of Eli and the times they'd had. But even though she was trying to focus on the better days of the relationship, her memories seemed set on the day she busted Eli cheating. It was on a Thursday afternoon, and she was feeling on top of the world as she walked to her white BMW. "You really showed them, Hayes," Morris Kirkland, her boss, said with a smile. "Thanks, Mr. Kirkland," she said with a smile. Morris leaned on the hood of her car and looked at her. "You keep that up and I will definitely be seeing you in the partnership list soon," he said. Erica smiled and nodded. "That is perfect because I have really been wondering when that raise was going to come," she said. Morris smiled and then laughed. "At this rate, sooner than you think," he said before he walked away, leaving Erica standing there with butterflies in her tummy. She could not help but feel proud of herself. She had taken on one of the most difficult cases she had ever heard of, and she had killed it. A $5 million settlement was not something people expected, especially since the initial offer had been $400,000. Actually, no one had seen that coming, not even the other lawyers. Everyone thought that she would probably get $1 million or $1.5 million, not more than that. Guess everyone was more than a little shocked when they heard the ruling. As soon as she got in the car, she cranked up the radio and smiled to herself as she sang along to Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer. "Oh yeah, there ain't no school like the old school," she thought as she sang along. She passed by Antonio's Grill, one of her favorite restaurants. She had made it a habit to get a celebratory dinner of ravioli and cherry tomatoes from Antonio's, and as usual, she always got 2 dinners. She had just walked out of Antonio's when she decided to give Eli a heads up and let him know she was on her way. "That's odd," she thought when Eli didn't pick up. "Maybe he is in the bathroom or something," she thought as she started her car. She shrugged and buckled in before she began driving home. She had considered getting a touch-up on her hair, but she shrugged the thought off. "If it was good enough for the jury, then it is good enough for Eli," she said to herself as she caught a glimpse of her reflection. Erica liked to consider herself as a small person with a big personality. She had learned to love and appreciate her height the day she discovered high heels. After spending her years in high school and college being the short girl, she had made a decision to see her glass as half full, especially since she was the most promising student in her class. After college, she got into the prestigious Kirkland & Smith, the leading law firm in the country, and according to Forbes, the 3rd largest firm in the UK and US combined. Most of her classmates were jealous since she was earning almost triple what they were making in her first year alone. 2 months into the new job, Erica had already earned a name for herself. She was like the Bethany Horowitz at Kirkland & Ellis, small but dangerous. When she finally got home, she looked at her reflection in the mirror before she pulled out the pin that held her loose bun in place, letting her thick, luxurious brown hair flow on her shoulders. She grabbed the takeout boxes from Antonio's Grill and stepped out of the car, but when she saw her reflection in the driver's seat window, she frowned. She put the boxes on the car roof before she took off the jacket she had on, leaving her in a cream-colored pencil button-down knee-length dress. Braving the cold Vermont weather would definitely be worth it in a few minutes. She twisted her head to the side, wondering what to do to look a little sexier, not that she needed any help or anything. A button or 2 should do the trick, she thought, as she undid 2 buttons, and then a 3rd. A smile played on her lips when she saw how perfect her cleavage looked. It was like looking at two amazingly perfect cushions on her chest. She grabbed her bag and the takeout boxes before she walked into the house. "Eli, babe, I'm home," she announced when she walked into the 3-bedroom house she shared with her fiancé. She looked around the living room and raised an eyebrow. There were 2 wine glasses and some Chinese takeout boxes. The TV was on, but there was no sign of Eli. She shook her head as she put her bag down and kicked off her shoes before she began clearing the table. This was classic Eli. He would always entertain his friends and forget or ignore to clean up. "Too bad you ruined your appetite. I brought us ravioli for dinner and you know what that means." "I won," she said excitedly as she walked the 2 glasses to the kitchen. She put her hands on the counter and wondered why Eli was not answering. A smile played on her lips when she realized that Eli must have been in the bathroom. He hated talking while on the can. He always said it was bad manners. But Erica could not wait to share her good news. She quickly made her way out of the kitchen and began walking down the hallway. But when she touched the doorknob, her heart skipped a beat. She saw a shoe outside her bedroom door, a shoe that didn't belong to her. She tried taking deep breaths as she walked towards her bedroom. There was no telling what she would find. Her mind was going crazy with all the different but possible scenarios waiting for her on the other side of the door. When she got there and pushed the door open, she gasped in anticipation, but all she saw was an empty bed. An empty, unmade bed. She looked around and blinked back tears when she saw a black satin skirt and a flowered blouse on the floor. She could hear the shower running in the bathroom, and the clothes on the floor, along with the unmade bed, told her more than she needed to know. But for some reason, she found herself slowly walking towards the bathroom. She wanted to stop herself, but for some crazy reason she couldn't. "Oh my God," she said in a low voice, when she opened the bathroom door and came face to face with a naked Eli who was pinning a naked woman to the bathroom wall. She opened her mouth to speak, but she was not sure what she was supposed to say. She gave him a disappointed look before she pulled off the princess-cut engagement ring and threw it at him. She spun on her heel and walked out of the bedroom, leaving Eli calling out to her, but she wasn't sure she wanted to hear anything he had to say. All she knew was that the wedding was off, and she could not stand being in that house a second longer. As the tears finally began rolling down her cheeks, Eli chased after her as she ran out to her car and started the engine. As she drove away, the red Prius parked opposite her house finally registered in her mind. She had seen it before, many times before, which meant that this, Eli's indiscretions, had been going on for a while. As she drove off, she could not help but wonder if he had cheated on her, because she was always busy working. "No, this has nothing to do with you, Erica. He made the choice to cheat because he didn't deserve you," she told herself as she drove off, but even those encouraging words were not enough to make her feel better about herself. The next thing she knew, Eli's stuff was gone from the house. He had moved out and moved on with his life without giving her as much as an explanation. And even though Erica knew she deserved an explanation, she didn't really want anything that reminded her of Eli's betrayal. Erica was staring at the ceiling with the sounds of Pierce Morgan in the background when she heard her apartment door open. She rolled her head to the side to see her sister Emily and her longtime friend Cassandra walking in. "That officially marks the last service provider canceled," Cassandra said as she sat down next to Erica. "Thanks, guys. I couldn't have done this without you," Erica said, forcing out a smile. "By the way, you should really lock up. The world is a dangerous place to be in nowadays," Emily said in a cheerful voice. Erica looked at her and shook her head. "I literally live in a building practically owned by the police department," she said. That may have not been reason enough, but for her it was enough. It had always been enough knowing that 80% of her neighbors had firearms, legal firearms. "Well, we came bearing gifts," Emily said, as she pulled out a bottle of champagne from the brown paper bag she was carrying. "We pinched it from the caterer's van. I mean, they shouldn't get to keep everything, right?" she asked. "Yeah, they are keeping the security deposit," Cassandra said matter-of-factly. Erica looked at the two and shook her head. "I hate to burst your bubble, guys, but you do know that bubbly is usually used for celebrating stuff, right?" she asked. Emily and Cassandra looked at each other and smiled before Emily popped the bottle. "Well, we are celebrating," Emily said. Erica raised an eyebrow. She wanted to ask what her sister meant, but she was too tired to let her brain work out the kinks. "Well, you and Eli are officially over, and trust me, if ever there was a reason to celebrate, this is it," Emily added with a smile. Erica shook her head and grabbed the bottle from her sister before taking long gulps from the bottle. "You do have glasses, right?" Cassandra said as she held her long, dark hair up in a bun. Erica put the bottle down and stifled a burp. "Well," Cassandra pressed. Erica rolled her eyes and walked to the kitchen. She caught a glimpse of the matching his and her mugs. Normally, she would have smiled and probably held Eli's cup in her hands, maybe even kissed it at some point. She sighed and dumped the 2 mugs in the trash, causing Cassandra and Emily to run into the kitchen. "Are you okay?" Cassandra asked when she and Emily walked in. "Yeah, we heard something break," Emily said. Erica turned around and smiled at them. "Never better." Emily looked inside the bin and smiled. "I also thought a little spring cleaning could do this place some good," she said. Erica smiled and reached for the wine glasses. "So what exactly are we drinking to?" Erica asked as she leaned against the counter. Cassandra handed her a glass and smiled. "There is the obvious reason, freedom from Eli, but then again, we could also just celebrate the fact that you never have to be in the same room with his family ever again," she said. Emily laughed and Erica nodded. Cassandra was right. One of the best things about her and Eli being over was never having to spend a day with Eli's judgmental family ever again. She raised her glass and took a long sip. "You know what I don't get?" Emily started as she looked through Erica's fridge. "The fact that men get off so easily." Erica's eyes lit up when her sister said that. "Funny. I was just thinking that before you guys came in," Erica started. "When a high school girl gets pregnant, she has to take a year or 2 before she goes back to school. But the guy could very well be on to his next target, maybe even getting another teenager pregnant," she said. Cassandra looked into Erica's brown eyes. "Is this really about some high school boy?" she asked. Erica took another sip of her champagne and shook her head. "No, it is about me dealing with all this crap while Eli is away having the time of his life with his boys and his new woman in Ibiza," she said. "Maybe he should have been responsible for returning the wedding presents. It was brutal," she added. Emily shut the fridge door and looked at her sister. "Hey, you know what? I am really proud of you," she said. Cousin Tricia would have most definitely gone ahead with the wedding, just to make sure she wasn't embarrassed, she added with a smile. "Yeah, she would have done that, wouldn't she?" she laughed. Cassandra looked at them, a confused look on her face. "Tricia? I have been friends with you 2 since senior year, and I think I would know of a Tricia given the fact that I have met most of your extended family," she said. Erica took another sip and nodded. "Actually, you have met her," she said. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. 4 years ago at the Thanksgiving party. The pretentious light-skinned woman who was acting all diva-like, she added. Cassandra frowned. "Oh, you are talking about Miss... I can't believe you don't have any salad at this party because everything is so fatty." "That girl?" she asked. Emily and Erica nodded. "I always knew I didn't like her." "Yeah, 2 years ago she paid someone to act as her boyfriend because she hated being the only one in the family who didn't have a man," Emily said. "I guess I was too thrilled to tell her that my date was actually a gay friend," she added. Erica laughed. "Yeah, I'm sure she is having a field day knowing that Eli and I called the wedding off," she said. "You know she once had a thing for him, right?" "Does she have a thing for everyone?" Cassandra asked, shaking her head. Emily and Erica looked at her. "What the hell are you talking about?" Emily asked. "The guy I brought to the Thanksgiving party 4 years ago," Cassandra started. "Yeah, that guy was amazing. Whatever happened between the 2 of you? What was his name anyway? CJ? DJ? Erica wondered as she played with a strand of her hair. JT, Cassandra said, wondering why Erica was throwing around random letters. He was cool and everything, but he had to move to Guam. Career choices and everything. So anyway, we've been keeping in touch over Facebook and stuff, but I always notice a Miss T posting on his wall. I didn't know who Miss T was at first, but when I checked her photo out, I remembered who she was. Really? What exactly does she say to him? Erica asked. Well, she is always asking if she can visit him in Guam and everything, Cassandra said, as the three of them walked back to the living room. Well, that's Trisha for you, Erica said, sitting back down. Emily and Cassandra sat down and looked at her. Erica noticed her phone ringing again and sighed. Need to get that? Emily asked. Erica shook her head. I really don't. It's a whole lot of apologies I can't handle, she said. Emily gave her an apologetic look. Don't give me that look. I'm okay. Actually, the way people are handling this whole thing is the main reason why I have to leave, Erica said as she looked at her sister. Emily shook her head and then shrugged. I'm just concerned. I mean, you have been talking of this trip for a week, and are you really sure this is what you want to do? I have never been so sure of anything in my life, she said with a smile. A change of scenery is exactly what I need to snap me back into reality. But what about your job? What did your boss say? Emily asked. Erica shrugged. I can't think of that right now. Besides, the guys at Kirkland and Ellis owe me. I haven't taken a day off in 2 years, she said in an authoritative tone. Besides, my bags are packed and I already bought my ticket, so there is no going back, she added. Cassandra topped up her glass and smiled. You're right, Boo. This is to a new start, she said as she raised her own glass. Erica smiled and raised her glass. To a new start, she said, before taking a sip. She could already see herself in her new start, with the wind blowing in her hair and the sand tickling her feet.
If you want more billionaire romances like this, please, my love, be sure to subscribe to the Romancely YouTube channel. I look forward to spending more time with you. Subscribe and let's make it happen.
Chapter 2. When Erica landed in Acapulco International Airport, she was already thanking her lucky stars that she had chosen Mexico over Hawaii for her first destination. The weather was perfect and the people were all too friendly. For the first time in a long time, she was happy she was not on the receiving end of people's pitiful stares. It had been months since she and Eli broke up, 6 months to be exact, but people were still looking at her like she had come to the end of herself. When she checked into her room, she took a long nap before hunger pains woke her up. She considered having room service, but when she looked at the time, she realized that what was initially supposed to be a short nap had actually turned out to be a 6-hour rest. She got out of bed and sent a quick text to her sister to let her know that she got to Acapulco safely. After that, she took a long shower and then changed into a spaghetti-strapped peacock maxi dress that showed off her perfect curves. She then straightened out her hair and put on some light makeup and some gold-hooped earrings. A smile played on her lips when she saw her reflection. It had been a long time since she put on a maxi dress. Thanks to Vermont weather, she rarely ever got a chance to wear anything sleeveless without a coat. She put on some pink lip gloss and then picked up her purse before she walked out of her room. She could not help but notice just how perfectly tanned the hotel guests were. Or are they locals and I just had a racist thought? She wondered as she rode in the elevator. When she got to the first floor, she made her way to the restaurant and took a seat with a beautiful beach view. So is it lunch or breakfast? She wondered as she looked at her phone. 3 in the afternoon. A really, really late breakfast. She was still looking at her menu when a waiter walked up to her carrying a glass of fresh pineapple juice. I'm sorry, I didn't order this, she said as she looked at the waiter. Complimentary drink for all our guests, miss, the waiter said with a smile. Erica looked up at him and smiled. She couldn't help but notice the boyish telenovela star vibe. The hotel also has a pineapple venture, the waiter added. Thanks, Erica said as she held the cold glass and lifted it to her lips. This is really good, she said when she put the glass down. The waiter smiled in appreciation. 3 years serving that, and I am yet to get a disappointed customer, he said. Erica smiled and took another sip. I'll have the chicken fajita, she said, but she wasn't sure that would be enough. She was famished. Could I also have a side of salsa and chips? She asked. The waiter scribbled something on his pad and nodded before he walked away. She took another long sip of her juice and looked up just in time to see a perfectly toned, muscled man walking into the restaurant. Damn, she thought as she looked at him. He was in a pair of white linen pants and a light blue shirt. Even though the shirt was buttoned all the way down, She could see the perfect muscular structure. She could almost picture it in her head. The man had perfect dark wavy hair, and Erica had to admit, he was the hottest man she had ever seen. When the man began walking towards her, she realized she had been staring and looked away. She took another sip of her juice and tried as much as she could not to make eye contact with him. "Oh, come on," she thought when the man took a seat right next to her. She thanked her lucky stars that she had a seat with a view, otherwise she would have been stuck staring at an amazingly hot guy. She was still looking at the beautiful scenery below when the waiter came back with her order. "Thank you so much. Please charge this to my room," she said as she inhaled the rich aroma. She was trying hard not to moan when she took her first bite. It was simply heavenly. "I am surprised I can't hear pleasure sounds coming out of you right now," the man seated at the table next to hers said. She turned around, dabbing the sides of her mouth where the food was threatening to mess up. "I beg your pardon?" Erica asked. "That's the fajita, right? When I first had it, I was with a few board members, and the whole restaurant thought we were having a sexual experience or something," the man said. Erica smiled and then laughed. "Cute and funny," she thought. "Well, maybe I was trying to make sure I don't get branded a pervert on my first day in Acapulco," she added. "First day, huh?" He looked at her and smiled. She nodded. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Erica almost jumped up in joy. "Sure," she said before taking another bite. "Sorry, my manners, Erica Hayes," she said when she swallowed. "Daniel Reese," he said. She looked at her hands and smiled. "I would shake your hand, but maybe we can do that in an hour or something?" she asked. He smiled and nodded. Erica took a tortilla chip and dipped it in salsa before she took a bite. "Would you like some?" she asked. Daniel frowned and Erica followed suit. "Come on, don't be a baby," she said. Daniel smiled and then reached for a chip before he dipped it in the salsa. "That's good," he said as he chewed. "Really good," he said as he reached for another tortilla. 3 years I have been coming here, and I have never thought of ordering this," he said. Erica raised an eyebrow. "I have to ask, what nationality are you?" she asked. "American. Why?" "Are you trying to tell me that you've never had tortillas?" she asked in surprise. "Well, I don't like admitting it in public, but I have actually never had any." Daniel shrugged. Erica's eyes grew wide. "Given the look on your face right now, I can assume that you are genuinely surprised," he said. She nodded and took a bite of her fajita. "I am," she said before taking another bite. "Why? I don't think it's that weird," he said. "Actually, it is just as strange as a Chinese man never having had rice in his life." Erica looked at him and smiled. "Okay, when you put it like that, I sound like an absolute snob," Daniel said. The waiter who had served her earlier came carrying a tray and stopped at their table. "Thank you, Emilio," he said as the waiter put a plate in front of him coupled with a glass of pineapple juice. "I see you already had a taste of this glass of heaven," he said before taking a long sip from his glass. Erica smiled and took a sip from her own glass. "It is perfect," she said. "I have been having a glass every single day since I got here. I don't know what I am going to do when I go back home. I mean, you can never get something this good and authentic back at home," he said. Erica looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "Just how long have you been here?" 14 days and counting." "Wow, any plans of going back time anytime soon?" "Oh, Erica, are you already bored with me? It's only been a few minutes," he teased. She smiled and shook her head. No, please don't get me wrong. It's nothing like that. It's just that you look like a venture capitalist kind of person, and such guys usually have a few weeks every 50 years to take a vacation," she said. He took a bite of his paella rice before he looked up at her. "I'm sorry, venture capitalist, whatever gave me away?" he asked as he looked at her. "Well, you might be in linen pants, but I work with suits all day. I know exactly what an Armani shirt looks like," she said. Daniel looked at her and nodded. He looked seemingly impressed. "Okay, now I have to ask what you do," he said. Erica took another bite and shrugged. "I was a lawyer, 2 years," she said before taking another bite. "Was? Did you change your mind about law or something?" he asked. Erica took a long, deep breath and shook her head. "Honestly, I don't really know. I gave my resignation to my boss before I took this trip," she said. "The trip is actually supposed to help me make up my mind about a lot of things." Daniel nodded and took another bite of his paella. So, what about you? Was I right about you, Mr. Venture Capitalist? She asked. Actually, I am what you can call an innovator, or at least my team is. He smiled. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. Daniel reached for his wallet and pulled out a business card. He looked at it for a few minutes before he handed it to Erica. Quicker Kitchen Me? The microwave guys? She asked. Daniel smiled and nodded. Wait, CEO? You run QKM? She asked, almost too surprised. You know about the company? He asked. Are you kidding? If you saw my kitchen, you would probably have me as your poster child, she said with a smile. Well, you see, you were really wrong about me being a venture capitalist, he said. Actually, unless you do the actual groundwork in your company, I really don't think you are anything other than a venture capitalist, she said, as she took one last bite of her food. Daniel was smiling, almost grinning. How did you ever get your law degree if you can't even know the right definition of venture capitalist? He asked. She looked at him and shrugged before reaching for her glass. How do you know that all this is not just an act? She asked, looking at him over the rim of her glass. Daniel looked at her perfectly round brown eyes and shook his head. Yes, how do I know? He said. She looked at him and took one last sip of her juice before putting the glass down. I guess you will never know, she said as she dabbed her mouth with her napkin. Leaving already? He asked as he looked at him. Well, I am done with my lunch or really late breakfast, she said as she looked at him. I would really like to see you again, he said. She looked at him and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Are you staying here at this hotel? She asked. Daniel nodded. Good, then I'll see you for breakfast tomorrow, she said as she walked out of the restaurant. She could almost feel Daniel's eyes on her as she made her way out. You came here to get away from everything, not to start a fling. That was the thought running in her mind, but somehow she pushed the thought to the back of her mind. When she got to her room, she could not wait to talk to her sister. When she finally turned the corner, Erica was practically running to the elevator. She had tried as hard as she could to maintain her femininity for as long as she thought Daniel was watching, before she finally broke into her real self. She was breathing hard and deep as she waited for the elevator to stop at her floor. She was drumming her fingers against the side of her thigh as she hummed a familiar tune. She didn't even realize that she was riding the elevator with 2 more people. Oh God, I'm so sorry, she said when she came to her senses. The man and woman in the elevator smiled and shrugged. You sure do look happy, the woman said. I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. Erica smiled and then shrugged. Well, that's what life's all about, right? The man pointed out as the elevator doors opened. Erica smiled at them politely before she walked out. She tried hard not to smile as she passed a few more hotel guests along the hallway. When she got inside her room, she tossed her purse somewhere as she headed for one of her bags. She pulled out her iPad and checked her connection as she sat on the bed. As soon as she established a connection, she smiled when she saw her sister was online. She dialed her and waited for her to pick up. Hey, you, she said when Emily picked up. Hey, what's wrong with your connection? Emily asked. What do you mean? She frowned as she looked at her screen. I can't see you, that's what's wrong, Emily said. Wait, I think I know what's going on. Hold up, she said in a low voice as she tapped on the Enable Video icon. There, she said, sitting back. Better, and oh, someone looks excited, Emily said with a smile. I kind of am, but I first want to hear about you. You look like you are still in the office, she said. Emily looked around her office and shrugged. Yeah, I guess the work is never really done, she said. Those guys don't pay you enough, Erica said. Emily smiled. I know, right? Sometimes I think that maybe I should have gone into law like you did, she added. Erica frowned and shook her head. What, you don't think I would crack it? Come on, Ems, you have always been the money guy. Accounts are like sex to you. You would never walk away if your life depended on it. You know, kind of what I did, Erica said. You know, I've been meaning to ask, are you sure that is what you really want? To just walk away from everything? Emily looked at her and smiled. Yeah, maybe I will rethink everything in the long run, but the truth is that right now this is all I want. To just be away from everything. Erica shrugged. I'm fine, I promise you, she added with a smile. Emily ran her fingers through her hair and sighed. "I'm happy if you're happy, sweetie," she said. Erica looked at her sister and smiled. If she could, she would have reached right through the screen and kissed her sister. Sometimes Emily acted like she was the older one, and Erica adored her for it. "So, why are you so happy anyway? I mean, I know that you are on vacation and everything, and that being happy is kind of part of the package, but you are a little glowy," Emily noted. Erica tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Okay, I'm not glowing, but if you must know, I met a guy." Erica grinned. "Wait, didn't you just land today?" Emily asked. From the tone in her sister's voice, she could tell that Emily was impressed. "Yes, I did, and I blacked out. I was too tired, but as it turns out, the decision not to have room service was what led to me meeting a fine gentleman in the restaurant," Erica said excitedly. "I didn't understand any of that," Emily frowned. "Okay, I wanted to have room service, with the exhaustion and everything, but I remembered that time we went to Puerto Vallarta and didn't get out of the room for most of the vacation so long. Story short, I ended up going downstairs and bam, I met the guy. And get this, he is hot," she said excitedly. Emily smiled at her sister. "So what was this, just a one-time meal, or is there something else in the future?" she asked. Erica shrugged as she thought of the look Daniel had given her as she left the restaurant. She was not sure, but years of working with other men making huge settlements had taught her that she could read men quite well, and the way Daniel had looked at her spoke volumes. "We are definitely going to have something else," Erica said just as she heard Emily's office door open and close. "Are you busy?" she asked when she saw Emily look up from her computer. "Yeah, I just got this stack of paperwork. Something to do with last month's financials. Talk tomorrow?" "Maybe, but if I don't, I'll get some time later this week," she shrugged. "I have a good feeling of what you'll be doing," Emily said before she hung up. Erica rolled her eyes. She didn't get enough time to tell her sister not to mention anything to Cassandra. Emily had a thing for always exaggerating, and given a choice, she would have loved to be the one to break the news to Cassandra. She shrugged and put away her iPad. Maybe she would take care of that later, much, much later.
Chapter 3. Needless to say, Erica was a little keener to detail when she dressed up the next morning. She had initially planned on wearing a sundress, but she also wanted to check out the pool later, or maybe the beach. "Maybe I'll just wear a swimsuit," she thought as she picked out a lime green bikini from her suitcase. She oiled herself and put it on before putting on a striped black and white swimwear cover-up. She held her hair in a high bun and put on a pair of silver dangling earrings and a pair of black flip-flops before she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She put on some light makeup and then looked at her phone and sighed. It was 9 o'clock. She didn't want to look like she was just going there with the intention of bumping into Daniel, but she also didn't want to miss out on seeing him. She bit her lower lip and touched up on her blush and lipstick before she headed out. She didn't know whether it was the adventurous pink lipstick or the fact that she was almost completely naked under her cover-up, but she felt a little more confident than usual. But her confidence suddenly vanished when the elevator doors opened and she came face to face with Daniel. "If I didn't know any better, I would think you are stalking me," was what she initially wanted to say, but when she opened her mouth, she could only mumble. She hated knowing that he could have such an effect on her. "Daniel, hi," she said as she walked in. She was hoping that he didn't notice how hot he looked in his neutral pants and dark blue t-shirt. His muscular chest was almost calling out to her. It was then that she knew it was official. The dry spell was getting to her. "Erica, fancy meeting you here?" Daniel said, looking at her. "You look about ready to hit the pool," he added as he looked at her up and down. "Maybe after breakfast," she said with a smile. "Sleep well?" he asked as she pressed one of the elevator buttons. She looked at him and nodded. "Like a baby," she said with a smile. Daniel nodded as a smile played on his lips. "You know, I never really understood why people compared a good night's sleep to a baby since babies wake up every 10 minutes, he said. She looked at him and shrugged. "Guess I don't blame you. You found the metaphor in use. I guess no one can blame you for continuing the trend," he added as the elevator door opened. She looked at him before she stepped out with him following closely. "Do you always make people feel bad about their upbringing?" Erica asked with a smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean... He started before she turned around and looked at him. Hey, I was just kidding, she said with a smile. I was kidding. You almost got me there, he said, grinning. He looked around and pointed at a private table in the corner of the restaurant. That looks good enough, he said as he led her to the table. Are you always this charming with ladies, or are you just doing this for me because you are intrigued? She asked as she sat down in the chair Daniel had pulled out for her. He took a seat on the opposite end of the table and looked at her. Intrigued? Why intrigued? He asked. Well, I could be the first woman who actually knew what your company was, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. At least I think the geek in me thinks so, she added quickly. Actually, yes. You are the first person who knew almost immediately what the words quicker kitchen me meant. Most people think I am just a weirdo putting random words together, he said. Erica smiled and then laughed. Yeah, that's what I get for having my dad get my cousin to be the face of Quicker Kitchen Me, he added in a rather cynical tone. I'm sorry, Mr. Reese, but is that cynicism I hear in your voice? She asked. He leaned back in his seat as he toyed with the menu. A little, he said as he looked at the menu. Apparently Zachary had the charisma the company needed to make the brand pop, he said, putting up air quotes. I'm guessing you would have wanted to be part of the advertising campaign at some point? She asked. He looked up and nodded. Well, where is your cousin Zachary now? She asked. Last I checked, he was a bouncer at a club in Vegas, he said almost proudly. She smiled at him and raised an eyebrow. See, you turned out better than he did, right? She said as Emilio walked up to them. Hi, Emilio. Can I have coffee? Black with scrambled eggs and pancakes? She asked. Daniel looked at her and raised an eyebrow. Really? You are away from home and you still want to play it safe with food? He asked, holding his hand up, stopping Emilio before he could scribble the order on his notepad. What are you talking about? She asked. Scrambled eggs and pancakes? How very American of you. Try something different. I don't know, Mexican maybe? He asked. She looked up at him and shrugged. Allow me, he said, before he looked at Emilio. We'll have the eggs, black beans, guacamole pico de gallo with Greek yogurt, he said, as Emilio jotted it down. And some coffee for me and... He looked at Erica. Orange juice, thank you, Erica said, as Emilio jotted it down and walked away. Before I even ask my next question, is Emilio the only waiter here? She asked. I like him. He is the one who usually serves me, plus he kind of gets me, he said. So, what do you have in mind? What was your question? It's about the food. Do you always eat something local every time you visit a new country? She asked. One time I was in Singapore and one of my business partners ordered me a sambal stingray dish. It sounds great, but when you look at it, it's like a bunch of ingredients slapped on a banana leaf, but it is heavenly, he said. You make it sound like it is some disgusting thing, she frowned. Well, when you look at it, you might be inclined to throw it out, but the first taste is truly everything, he said, a faraway look in his eyes. He almost looked like he was reliving a romantic moment. She smiled and shook her head. Trust me, Erica Hayes, you need to live a little, he added in a low voice. What makes you think I haven't lived at all? Daniel leaned in, and a few strands of his thick mane fell out of place. He looked at her through the hair strands and smiled. Something about you tells me that there is more to this trip than you are letting on, he said. Are you a mind reader now, Mr. Reese? She leaned back in her seat and forced a smile. He looked at her and smiled. Maybe, he said in a low voice. She looked into his eyes and shrugged. Maybe you are reading into the wrong things, she said, as Emilio came back with their order. Daniel smiled at her as Emilio put their food on the table. You are going to make me work for the intel, aren't you? He asked. She took a sip of her juice and looked at her plate. She had to admit, it did look inviting. She put the glass down slowly and picked up a fork. You have no idea, she said before she took a bite. Oh, my dear Lord, this is actually really good, she said, taking another bite. Daniel smiled as he took a bite of his own food. Hate to say I told you so, but I told you so, he said, with a cocky smile. So, Erica started as she looked at him. What is the story with you anyway? I just met you less than 24 hours ago, and all I know is that you run a company of home appliances and that you probably came out here for business and decided to stay on an impromptu extended vacation. She took another bite and looked up at him. Daniel looked at her and smiled. There isn't much to me, really. I run a company my father founded, and I have learned the hard way that every so often I have to make a little time for my personal time. And maybe that's why I decided to take a few extra days after the deal closed, he said. She looked at him and raised an eyebrow. Now I have to ask, she said. He looked at her, and she smiled. And I know how ridiculously hypocritical I sound right now. Okay, I will bite, he said as he took a sip of his coffee. This time, he added. That's more like it, she said with a smile. Okay, this is what happened. I was trying to make everything work out, at work and at home, and I guess I somehow leaned too much into the corporate and forgot all about life at home. So one day I got back home from work and I was all alone, he said. I waited for a few weeks and my girlfriend didn't show up and she wasn't answering my calls either. I just put two and two together when she came as my business partner's date to one of my parents' events. He took a bite of his food and looked up at her. So that's the story of my life. The sad, lonely story of my life, he added as he looked up at her. She took a sip of her juice and smiled sadly. Your story is really sad. Does it get you laid much? She asked as she took another bite. Daniel smiled and then laughed. What would make you say something like that? Well, I have worked with enough big players to know that Rolex on your wrist is the real deal, and you are a good-looking man, a rich good-looking man. So there is no way you can convince me that you have never dropped that story just to get laid, she said. Daniel looked into her intense brown eyes and smiled. Well, I might have gotten a pity lay one too many times, but believe me, I have never told that story to anyone before. At least not with that intention, he said. She raised an eyebrow and smiled at him. Aha. So you have told that story before, haven't you? She asked with sly smile. Maybe I have, but enough about me. What about you? He asked as he looked at her. Her gaze dropped as she toyed with her food. She was not sure she was ready to open up yet. It had taken a really long time to even open up to two of her closest people, her sister and Cassandra. She took a long, deep breath and looked up. It's that bad, huh? He asked. To be honest, it's really that bad plus a whole lot of shit on top, she said as she looked at him. She shook her head and then looked up. But it's kind of almost the same thing as your story, she added. Daniel raised an eyebrow. So you let work get the better of you too? He asked. Not exactly, but there was no way around this. She had no more words to express herself. She looked up at him and smiled. She didn't know what it was about him that made her feel so safe with him. Normally, she wouldn't have said anything to a man she barely knew, but she suddenly had an urge to pour her heart out. I trusted someone, a lot, and he hurt me, she said in a low voice. A lot, she added as she looked down at her plate. Daniel looked at her and suddenly felt guilty for making her open up. Hey, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to make you revisit a painful past, he said. Don't be, it's not your fault, she smiled. Yes, it is, he said as he reached for one of her hands. Believe me, I honestly didn't mean to make you relive a painful past, he said in a soft voice. Water under the bridge, she shrugged as she looked at him. She pulled her hand away from his and took a bite of her food. She then took a long sip of her juice before she put the glass down. She couldn't help but notice the sad look Daniel was giving her. What? She asked. Nothing, he said in a low voice. Really? Because you are looking at me like some kind of porcelain doll about to be run over by a truck, she said with a smile. Where do you get your metaphors from? He laughed. I don't know. I just say whatever feels right, she said, taking another bite. Clearly, he said as he looked at her. But anyway, apart from the sob story, I have one sister, a twin Emily, fraternal, not identical, and my best friend Cassandra. They are the two most important people in my life, she went on as she toyed with her food. We have a younger brother, though sometimes we feel like he is the older one, and that's that about my family. Oh wait, there is my mom and dad, some crazy telenovela story there, that's it, she said almost excitedly. Okay, that's a whole lot about your family. Maybe you should try and see if you can match it. All right. I have one sister, Melanie. Needless to say, she is my world. She is 5 years younger than me, and she always acts like she is an adult, but she will always be my baby sister. You know, kind of like the situation you guys have with your brother. And then there is my dad, and we get along quite well despite the whole Zachary incident when I was younger. And I guess that's that, he said. She looked at him and wondered where all this was going and how it had started. I should have mentioned my best friend Vince, he added. He looked at her and she laughed. She had no idea where all this was going. That is the quickest I have ever got to know anyone, she said as she looked at him. Me too, Daniel said. She put her fork down and looked at him. So what now? He asked. She shrugged as she dabbed a napkin on her mouth. I don't know about you, but I am going to chill out by the pool, she said. Daniel frowned. What? She asked when she noticed his frown. You do know that after meals you are supposed to take at least an hour before swimming, right? He said. She raised an eyebrow. Yes, I know, but I didn't say I am going to take a dip in the pool. I'm just going to get a tan. He took a deep breath and put his fork down. I have a better idea, he said as he pushed his seat back from the table. She looked at him and raised an eyebrow. Come on, he said as he offered his hand to her. She looked up at him and wondered why she was so trusting of him, but for some reason she just put her hand in his and stood up. You do realize that I have a swimsuit on, right? She asked. Don't worry, the place we're going doesn't really require much of a dress code, he said, as they started walking towards the door. She suddenly stopped and looked at him. Are you taking me to a nude beach or something? She asked. You're adorable, he smiled as they walked out of the restaurant. She could feel her stomach knotting up as they walked through the hotel lobby. She didn't know why she was getting all kinds of weird feelings with him. She could feel the excitement building up as she walked out of the main doors. She smiled at the doorman as he held the door open for her. She put on her sunglasses and crossed her arms over her chest as Daniel waved down a cab. He looked at her and held the door open for her. She gave him an appreciative smile and climbed in. She looked at him as he walked round the car and climbed in next to her. La Quebrada, please, he said to the driver before he strapped himself in. You do know I am being an idiot for getting into a car with a stranger, right? She asked. Well, I don't know how many strangers know such intimate details about each other, he said. She smiled and turned to look out the window. You don't have much to say now, huh? I'm keeping my comments to myself, she said. Trust me, you are going to love La Quebrada, he said with a smile. She looked at him and flashed him a smile that reached out to parts of him he didn't think possible. I better, she said in a flirtatious voice, even though she never intended to.
Chapter 4. Daniel was right. La Quebrada was more than what she expected it to be. It was the kind of place that you expect to see on a postcard. She was just in awe of the place. Everything about it was perfect in more ways than one. Thanks to her job, she hadn't been out in a long time, and even Daniel could tell she was excited. Someone really needed to have this vacation, didn't she? He asked. She looked at him as they walked along the beach and shrugged. It has been a while. I almost feel like a kid taking a first-time trip to Disneyland, she added as they came to a stop. Come on this way, he said, leading her up a sandy trail. Trust me on this, Erica, he said in a soft voice as he took her hand in his. She sighed and followed him up the trail, which brought them to a beautiful private rocky area. Erica was not sure what he had in mind or where he was taking her. As they slowly climbed up and down the rocks, Erica found herself wondering whether this was what she had always had in mind when she pictured a perfect getaway. She gasped when they finally came to a small private pool enclosed by rocks. There was a canopy of trees hanging over one side of the rocks, giving the rocky resort a perfect shade. Wow, Erica said under her breath as she looked around. I know, right? He said, looking around. She smiled and walked up to one of the rocks and sat down. He walked up to where she was and took a seat next to her. I take it you've been here before, she said without looking at him. Daniel nodded as he looked around. Yeah, this has always been my small slice of Acapulco. Maybe the reason why I keep coming back here, he pointed out. I don't know why, but I have always found some kind of peace when I was here. I guess this must be a very sacred place for you, she said. He nodded and then turned to look at her. You know what? I have never brought anyone back here. You are the first. She smiled and shrugged. And they say you never forget your first, right? She asked. He laughed as he looked at her and nodded. Yes, they do, he said in a soft voice. There was a long silence as the two of them looked at each other. Even with her sunglasses on, Erica could feel his piercing hazel eyes looking into her. She suddenly looked away when she felt her cheeks flush. She could still feel him looking at her. Oh, damn, Erica, you're blushing. Don't let him see you blushing, she thought as she looked around the perfect scenery. She suddenly took off her sunglasses and her cover-up dress before she stood up and stepped out of her flip-flops. Daniel looked at her curvy body as she looked at the water. She could have sworn she heard him breathe a long, low wow when he saw her in her swimsuit. Is this a safe depth to dive in? She asked without turning around. Yes, it is, he said just minutes before she jumped into the water head first. She swam a few laps before she finally came up. Her bun, which had now come undone, was framing her face. She looked at him and smiled. Are you coming in? The water's great, she said. He smiled and shook his head. What? You bring me out here in the middle of nowhere and you can't even indulge me? She asked. He laughed and rested his weight on his hands. But I have no swimsuit. You have some boxers on or something? Erica asked, and he nodded. Well, that's good enough for me, she said before she floated on her back, giving him a perfect view of her curvy body. Her hair was floating around her head like a perfect dark cloud. Why, Miss Hayes, are you flirting with me? He teased. If I said I was, would you come in? She asked with a smile. He stood up and began unbuttoning his shirt. He could almost feel himself getting hard with every button that came undone. He did not understand the kind of hold this woman had on him, but seeing her floating in the clear blue water with her crotch and breasts covered in the bright lime green fabric was more than enough to get a rise out of him. He then went ahead and took off his pants before he jumped in the water. Erica dove down and swam to one side trying to get away from him, but he followed her. He got really close to her and smiled. What else don't I know about you? He asked. She shook her head and shrugged. I don't know, she said in a low voice. Really? Because I feel like there is something more you are holding out on, he said. She waved her arms around in the water and looked at him. I don't know what to say, she said as he moved even closer to her, as if he was not already close enough. She could almost feel the warmth of his body even in the cold water. He looked at her, and Erica felt her cheeks get warm again. She was blushing again, and this time she was a bit too close to him. She turned around and swam away from him. So we are racing now? She heard him asking before he followed her to one end of the pool. What is this, Erica? Why can't you get your act together around this guy? She wondered as she swam back to their point of origin. When she surfaced, she saw him following closely. I'm sorry if I'm a little fast. Swimming is the only kind of exercise I have been getting for the last 2 years, she said. I can tell, Daniel said as she pulled herself out of the water. Daniel followed suit and sat next to her. I have to ask, she started as she squeezed the water out of her hair. Why is this place special to you? Daniel shrugged and took a long, deep breath before he shook his head. You know, I'm not really sure. All I know is that I love being here. It's nice and quiet and private, he said in almost a whisper. She smiled and nodded. She totally understood. This was like his Hollywood sign. The first time I went to Hollywood, I found myself in the Hollywood sign, she started. Daniel turned and looked at her, raising an eyebrow. In? He asked. She smiled and nodded. I thought that place is restricted. It is, but I was in the company of some crazy people and there was a lot of alcohol involved. Let's just say I have no idea how everything happened. All I know is that it did, and to date, I still take the hike, even though the authorities say that it is a risk, she said with a smile. It is my special place, she added as she looked at him. Daniel looked into her big brown eyes and smiled at her. He felt drawn to her as she was to him. It was almost like there was some kind of chemistry between them. He shifted his weight, getting himself closer to where she was. Somehow I feel like we are a kindred spirit, he said in a low voice. She nodded and forced a smile. Yeah, kindred spirits, she echoed as he got even closer to her. She wanted to move away, but there was some kind of magnet holding her in place. She couldn't move. She could feel her heart beating hard as he brought his face closer to her. Almost too close. She was almost in a panic as she felt his warm breath on her cheek. But even then, she didn't move away. She closed her eyes when she felt his lips brushing against hers in a soft, slow kiss. This would have been the first kind of male attention she had received in almost 7 months, and it was doing things to her body she never thought possible. When he finally pulled away, she was almost a mess. She was like butter in his hands. He would have done anything with her, and she would have let him. It was almost a full minute when she finally got the courage to pull away from him. She had her eyes closed and her cheeks were flushed. I'm sorry, she stammered. She was not very sure what she was sorry for, but she knew that it was probably not a good idea for her to be there. No need to be, I should be the one apologizing, Daniel said as he looked at her. Erica's eyes were darting to and fro as she wondered what she was supposed to do next. She didn't know the way back to the beach. She reached for her cover-up and put it on, making Daniel wonder whether he should have taken a few more minutes before he moved in for the kill. I'm really sorry. He started, but she was already on her feet putting on her flip-flops. Her wet body was already clinging to the cover-up, making her curse herself for jumping in the water in the first place. This was a bad idea, she muttered under her breath as she looked around. A really, really bad idea. She was now trying to retrace her steps, but it was like her mind was blank. She couldn't make out what was happening. She just wanted to be away from that place. After all, it was his place. Are you okay? Daniel asked as he stood up. To him, she looked like a confused woman who had just woken up in some strange man's bed. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how we came up here. She nodded and looked around. Daniel grabbed his shirt and put it on. I'll show you, he said. No, Erica said a little too loudly, surprising even herself. I'm sorry, She started as Daniel pulled his pants on. She looked at him and put on her sunglasses. There is no way you can find your way back to the beach without my help, Erica, Daniel said as he zipped up his pants. He felt strange putting on his clothes with his wet boxers. He knew that by the time they got to the beach, he would look like he peed himself, but he didn't care at this point. He had never seen anyone this agitated. If he knew this was going to happen, he would have never asked her up here, let alone kiss her. Unlike the walk up to the pool, the walk back to the beach was surprisingly quiet. When they finally got to the beach, Daniel looked at Erica and asked if he could call a cab. No, I'll just go, she said before walking off, leaving him standing there stunned. The cab station is this way, Daniel called out as he looked at her. Erica stopped in her tracks and turned around. She walked up to where Daniel was, and he was trying as hard as he possibly could not to laugh as he pointed her to the direction of the cabs. It went without saying that Erica wished she could just fly out of there. Throughout the drive back to the hotel, Erica was cursing herself for being so vulnerable. She hated that she was so weak in Daniel's presence. Or was it that all that time she had stayed celibate was actually catching up with her? She was breathing hard and deep as she walked into her room. She walked to the bathroom and grabbed a towel before she collapsed on the bed. She was cursing herself for more than 1,000 reasons. What the hell were you thinking? She wondered as she looked at the ceiling. At this rate, you could have very well let the mailman feel you up. She shook her head and got up from the bed before she walked to the bathroom. She turned on the water and stripped off her swimwear before she stepped into the water. She closed her eyes and ran her fingers through her wet hair as the water ran down her body. She wanted to talk to someone, needed to talk to someone, but knowing her sister, Emily would have probably loved the whole thing. After a shower that took almost an hour, she stepped out of the bathroom and toweled herself up before she sat in front of the mirror. She took a long, deep breath as she dried her hair out, every minute wondering why she was feeling like such a mess. Maybe I am just being too hard on myself, she thought. But then she brushed the thought off. That was exactly what Emily would have said. Cassandra would have probably come down to Acapulco to slap the silly out of her, because according to her, Erica was trying to live her life down rather than living it up. She looked at her phone and shrugged. She was starving, and she couldn't bear to go downstairs in case she bumped into Daniel. She didn't know why, but she couldn't face him. Maybe it was the embarrassment she felt, or the way she just felt downright dumb for allowing herself to be so defenseless with him. She walked over to the bed and called the front desk. "Hi, I'd like to order in," she said as she leaned against the bed rest. "Can I have some fries and a double cheeseburger?" she asked. She could almost hear Daniel's voice telling her how predictably American she was being with her food. "Sure, Miss Hayes, would you like a drink with that?" the guy at the reception asked. She took a minute and shrugged. "No, I'll just have something from the minibar," she said. "Actually, cancel the burger. Get me some wings instead," she added. "Of course, Miss Hayes," the receptionist said before she thanked him and hung up. She looked around and walked over to the dressing table. She slowly oiled up as she replayed the events of that afternoon. She could still feel the warm tingle of his lips on hers. She looked at her reflection as she let the towel drop to the seat. As she oiled her torso, she couldn't help but feel sad for herself. This was the only kind of contact she'd had in the last 7 months that came anything close to intimacy. She found herself wondering why she had not heeded Cassandra's advice and got a sex toy. Maybe she wouldn't be feeling this silly and/or horny if only she had taken matters into her own hands. She walked to the closet and pulled out a pair of blue tights and a white t-shirt. She pulled on the t-shirt and then put on some black panties before she put on the tights. She was about to walk back to the bed and see what was on TV when she heard a knock on the door. They definitely work fast in this hotel, she thought as she walked to the door. She had a smile on her face as she opened the door. "You most definitely deserve a generous tip for." Her voice trailed off when she saw Daniel outside her door. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she asked in a low voice. "Can I come in?" he asked, smiling at her. She took a moment before taking a step to the side, allowing him in. "So, what exactly do I deserve a tip for?" he asked as she closed the door. She pushed a strand of hair out of the way and shrugged. "I ordered room service a few minutes ago," she said as she led him to her bed. She looked at him and shrugged. "Why are you here?" she asked as she looked at him. As soon as the words left her lips, she knew that she was being a little rude. She closed her eyes and shook her head. "I'm sorry, She started before he sat down. "I'm here to apologize," he said as he looked up at her. She crossed her arms on her chest and shook her head. "You don't have to," she said as she looked at him. "It is as much." Her voice trailed off. She wanted to say that it was as much her fault as it was his, but somehow she couldn't bring herself to saying that. She would be admitting to him that she wanted him to kiss her. "You don't have to," she said again. "I guess I just don't know why I suddenly feel so drawn to you, so free with you," he said. Erica looked at him and tried not to smile. "There is something you need to know," he said without looking at her. "The girl I told you about, my girlfriend, ex-girlfriend. It happened almost 3 years ago, and since then I have been taking these trips around the world trying to figure myself out, but every time I get close to someone, I always feel like there should be something more, like I'm never really completed." Erica wasn't very sure where he was going with this. She looked at him and shook her head. "Daniel?" She started as she looked at him. He shook his head and stood up. "No? Don't. I'm trying to explain myself," he said as he took a step towards her. She looked up at him and wondered what he was going to say next. She was trying as hard as she could not to get too close to him, but even then, she couldn't deny what was happening between them. She opened her mouth to talk, but a knock on the door interrupted her. She turned around and walked to the door and opened it. It was her food, finally. She smiled as the hotel employee wheeled her food into the room. She walked to where she had tossed her purse and looked through for any kind of local currency. She shook her head when she noticed that she didn't have anything local and then pulled out a $20 bill from her wallet and handed it to the waiter before she closed the door. She didn't know what happened next. All she knew was that 1 minute she was closing the door and the next minute she was pinned against the door by his body. She gasped into his mouth as he kissed her deeply, his lips crushing hers.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene reference is Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 4, Love Scene 1.
"What the hell is wrong with you, Erica? You are already playing out domestic fantasies in your head with a man you barely know," she thought. "A man you barely know." The words were echoing in her head. Barely know. Suddenly, Erica sat up. It was as if something had been switched on, snapping her back to reality. This was not her. This was not in her playbook. Maybe Daniel not having the condoms with him was some kind of sign. Shit, she thought as she climbed off the bed. She grabbed her clothes from the floor and quickly pulled them on just as Daniel walked back in. Okay, I'm back. Where were we? He started as he closed the door behind him. His voice trailed off when he saw a fully dressed Erica. What's going on? He asked as he walked towards her. Erica knew the kind of hold he had on her and she couldn't let him get so close. She took a step back and crossed her arms over her chest. Daniel, I think this was a mistake, she said in a low voice. Why? 3 minutes ago, you wanted me as much as I wanted you. What changed? He asked as he looked at her. Maybe not having the condoms with you was some kind of sign that... Her voice trailed off. She couldn't really finish that sentence. She knew how silly it sounded. She looked at him and shrugged. This was not a very good position she had allowed herself to be in. She could feel tears threatening to fall down her cheeks. Tears of shame, tears of embarrassment. She turned around and ran to the bathroom, leaving a stunned Daniel standing there, unsure of what he was supposed to do. She sat on the toilet, cursing herself for what had transpired in her room for the last half hour. Are you okay? Do you need anything? She heard Daniel ask. She shook her head as if he could see her. No, I'm sorry, I just can't, she said. Daniel knew better than anyone what rushing someone into doing something they were not ready for could do. He sat on the edge of the bed and ran his fingers through his hair. Okay, I'll just stay. He started before Erica shook her head again. No, she said, interrupting him. Just go. She hated herself for sounding so rude. Please, Daniel, just go, she said again. Daniel took another deep breath and stood up. He walked to the door and took a few minutes before he finally walked out of Erica's room feeling like a complete idiot. When Erica heard the door close, she slowly walked out of the bathroom and walked over to the bed. She sighed when she saw the packet of Trojans Daniel had left on the bed. She slowly sunk to the floor and wondered if her window was high enough to actually ensure that she would die if she jumped out.
Chapter 5. When Daniel got back to his suite, he could not help but feel silly. Even though his employees and friends thought he was the most eligible bachelor, the truth was that he had not been in the dating scene for a very long time. And the rules had most definitely changed. The way he managed to get Aubrey would obviously not work with Erica. While Aubrey was hyper and outgoing, Erica was cool and relaxed. More of an indoors person, really. She was the kind of person who would obviously choose to spend a night in watching an old movie rather than go out to a noisy club. She was smart and organized and balanced. Maybe that was what had drawn him to her in the first place. The balance. He'd had enough of casual dates with younger women who thought a fun night out had to include a number of colored shots before going to get down on the dance floor. He walked to the fridge and grabbed a beer before he walked back to the couch. He sat down and switched on the TV and tried to push the events of the last hour to the back of his mind. He still had a hard-on, and the more he tried to forget about Erica, the more the images of her flawlessly tan skin played through his mind like a slideshow. After a few minutes, it was apparent that his hard-on was not going anywhere anytime soon. He stripped off his clothes as he walked to the bathroom and turned on the water. Usually he would have taken a warm shower, but today he needed a cold fix. A quick cold fix. He shivered slightly when he felt the cold water run down his body as he tried forgetting Erica. He didn't know how long he had been in the bathroom, but the cold shower definitely worked. He had just walked out of the bathroom when he heard a knock on his door. He quickly wrapped a towel around his waist and then grabbed another one and dried off his hair and face as he walked to the door. He pulled the door open expecting to see one of the hotel staff with his mail or something, but his jaw almost dropped when he saw Erica standing out there. "I asked Emilio for your room number," she said in a low voice. "Care to come in?" Daniel asked as he stepped aside. She walked into his suite, and he closed the door before turning around. "You okay?" he asked, looking at her. She smiled and nodded before she brought her hand from behind her back, revealing the Trojans he'd left in her room earlier. She looked at him as he opened his mouth to talk, but she really didn't want to hear anything. She pressed a finger against his lips and shook her head.
Oh no,
This adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene references Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 5, Love Scene 2.
All better? He asked. So much better. She looked at him and shrugged. I don't even want to ask how you knew about the whole wet washcloth thing. It's simple science. Men are good to go after a quick cleanup, but women need a whole lot of care. So it just made sense, he said. Well, thank you, she said with a smile. Daniel looked at her and brushed a hair out of her face. Well, you're very welcome, he said as he looked into her eyes. So, I have to ask, what changed your mind? He asked as he looked at her. She smiled and shrugged. I don't know. I guess I thought I was just being an idiot. I mean, I don't have anyone I'm saving myself for, and there was a good-looking guy who was willing to take me to awesome places after one day. She took a deep breath and looked at him. I need to start living again, and somehow I feel like you are a big part of this, she added with a smile. She looked at him and felt herself blush again. I'm hungry, he said out of nowhere. I'm starved, she agreed, laughing. And there is a good plate of crispy fries in my room, speaking of rooms. How is your place so damn huge? I mean, this place is like my apartment, actually bigger, she said. Daniel laughed. So is this like the presidential suite or something? She asked. He smiled and shook his head. No way. The presidential suite has like 2 balconies and almost 4 bedrooms. They should call it a presidential house or something, he said. Well, presidential suite or not, I need to eat something, she smiled. I got this, he said, before climbing off the bed. She looked at him as he walked out of the bedroom, totally naked. She could not help but smile as she watched his butt walking away.
Chapter 6. When she woke up the next day, Erica was ecstatic. She and Daniel had ended up staying in for the rest of the day and night. Daniel even showed her the true meaning of room service. She had gone up from binging on fries and double cheeseburgers to lobster and champagne. As her eyes fluttered open, she noticed Daniel looking at her. How long have you been watching me? She asked. I don't know, he shrugged. And I know that's kind of creepy. I heard how it sounded. Well, thanks for saying it, she said as she sat up. She looked around and shrugged. I left my phone in my room. I have no idea what time it is. It is, he said as he reached for his phone. 9:30, he said before he put the phone down next to her. I really need to get back to my room. If not for anything, then for my phone. Are you sure I can't charm you to stay here longer? I did pay for the room, she said matter-of-factly. A smile played on her face as he leaned in to kiss her. He was just about to kiss her when his phone rang loudly. He put a hand around her neck and pulled her to kiss her deeply before he picked up his phone. Reese, he said when he picked up as he walked out of the room. She took a long, deep breath and looked around, wondering where her clothes were. She got off the bed and walked to the bathroom. She splashed some cold water on her face and then looked up at her reflection. A smile played on her face as she looked at her post-coital look. She had to admit, she loved it. She grabbed one of the bathrobes on the rack and put it on. He has a rack of bathrobes, I've got just the one, she thought as she looked around the huge bathroom. She could literally fit her bed in that bathroom without a hustle. Guess that is the difference between a room and a suite, she thought as she walked out of the bathroom. She picked up her tights from the floor and put them on the bed. Before she walked out to the living room where she found her t-shirt on the floor, she picked up the t-shirt and the towels she had tossed there the previous day. Before she walked back to the bedroom, she sat down on the edge of the bed and began putting on her tights as the events of the last 24 hours replayed in her mind. She was just about to put on her t-shirt when Daniel walked in looking distraught. Everything okay? She asked as she pulled her t-shirt over her head. He nodded as she stood up. I just got a call from Venezuela. Something is not going so well in at La Nacio de Café and I just bought 30% stock, he said. Erica felt as if she had just been stabbed. This could only mean one thing. Her short fling was over. Does that mean you have to go to Venezuela? She asked. Sadly, yes, he nodded. Guess that's that then, huh? Can you say shortest fling ever? She frowned. He smiled and took a seat on the bed. You know it doesn't have to be over yet. he said as he looked at her. What? You are going to let your 30% stock go down the drain and not go to Venezuela? She questioned. No, you can come with me, he said with mischief in his eyes. She raised an eyebrow and laughed. Come on, get real. I am being real, he said with a serious face. Her eyes grew wide as she looked at him. She shook her head and got up from the bed. Me? Go to Venezuela? She asked as she turned to look at him. Daniel climbed across the bed and got off on the other side. Why not? You are the one who told me that you took a break from your career and everything. This would be a great opportunity for you to experience a new culture and country, he said. She shook her head, unsure of what she was supposed to say. Daniel took her hands in his. If history has taught us anything, it's that you will go out there and come back here with your bags packed, asking when we're going to leave, he said. She raised an eyebrow and gave him a dirty look. Really? You are going to bring that out now? Too soon? She nodded. So when do you leave? As soon as you make up your mind, he said as he looked at her. She smiled and flipped her hair over her shoulder. You are really sure that I am going to be on that flight with you, huh? I have a lot of confidence. He smiled and nodded. She pulled her hand away and smiled. Let me figure a few things out first, she said as she walked to the door. Can't you figure them out here? He called out when he heard the door open and close, but there was no answer. She was gone. When she got to her room, she grabbed her phone from the nightstand and looked at the screen. She could almost feel all the curses her sister and Cassandra were hurling at her. 22 missed calls, 9 text messages, 14 voicemails, she thought as she looked through the messages. Hey sis, sorry I was a bit tied up. Are you with Cassandra right now? She put her phone aside and walked over to the closet. She was wondering what she would wear. She could do a maxi, but that was just good for the beach. If she was going to accompany Daniel to Caracas, then she might as well wear a pair of pants. Listen to you considering the trip to Venezuela. You don't even know this guy that well, she thought as she looked through her closet. She heard her phone vibrate loudly, making her drop the hangers she had in her hands. She ran to the bed and picked up the phone. Yes, video chat? She smiled and typed sure before she grabbed her iPad and called her sister. She sat on the bed and waited for Emily to answer the call. Hey, where the hell have you been? Emily asked when she picked up. I'm fine, thank you, and how are you? Erica smiled as she looked at the screen. Emily, who looked seemingly upset, shook her head. And where is Cassandra anyway? She asked as she tried looking over Emily's shoulder. I'm here. Your sister won't let me look at you, Cassandra said as she positioned the computer in a way that Erica could see both of them. Hey, girl, Erica said as she smiled at Cassandra. Hey, how's Acapulco? She asked as she looked at Erica, who shrugged. It's all the sun and sand you could ever want. It is beautiful, she said with a smile. And that's why I left my phone in my room, and... Her voice trailed off when she noticed the look on her sister's face. You are lying. You always take your phone everywhere, Emily said. Yeah, even in the bathroom. I've been there when you've done it, you know, Cassandra said. Erica smiled. Your sister told me something about a guy you met out there. Did he have anything to do with the fact that you were not answering your phone calls or texts? Cassandra asked. Erica looked at the two of them and shook her head. Oh my God, Cassie, she has that glow. I haven't seen it since. I don't even remember when, Emily said excitedly. She got laid, Ems. You got laid, didn't you? Cassandra said as she looked at Erica, who was now smiling shyly. Guilty, she said in a low tone. Finally, Emily and Cassandra said in unison. Erica raised an eyebrow. Hey, it was not that bad, she said. Come on, you used to get pissed off at the old guy who walks slowly at the store, Emily said. Well, I was in a hurry. He was making me put a lot of things on hold. Erica frowned. Emily and Cassandra exchanged a knowing look. For a whole year? Emily asked. Hey, it was only 7 months, Erica said. Emily shook her head and shrugged. Well, it seemed longer, so what's going on? What do you have planned for the day? Erica took a long, deep breath. Well, I am either going to swim with the dolphins at the Sisi Acapulco Magico or take a trip down to Venezuela. Wait, what? Cassandra asked as she looked at Erica. Erica touched the corner of her iPad and ran her finger on the screen. What the hell are you talking about? Emily asked. Well, see that guy I told you about? He is part of this company La Café Nation, and there seems to be a problem, so he asked me to go with him, Erica said. You mean La Nation de Café, Emily said. Erica raised an eyebrow. You know it? Yeah, my company handles their American market. How did he even get his foot in that? The shares are like $150, she said. I have no idea. Today was the first time I heard anything about that company. But that's beside the point. What the hell am I supposed to do? I mean, I haven't known him for that long. She never got a chance to finish her statement. Emily was giving her one of those looks that made her thank God she was not right there. She would have most definitely smacked her right on the forehead. Go, Emily said. Cassandra was nodding. Am I the only one who is still reasonable here? Erica asked. Did you miss the part where I said that I hardly know the man? You and the man you hardly know have already bumped uglies. There is no way you can get more acquainted than that. Cassandra smiled. Yeah, plus, we all know that the only reason you are asking us is because you need validation. You already want to go, you know that, Cassandra said. Word, Emily said as she fist-bumped Cassandra. And plus, this is sex on the regular without any kind of attachment. You know you need to get laid and you are on vacation. Just consider it one more destination that is not on your dime, Emily said. I'm a money person and that makes a lot of sense to me. Erica laughed and shook her head. She looked at Cassandra and Emily and shrugged. I'll let you know what I've decided. Talk later. We all know what you've decided, sis. Safe journey, Emily said before she hung up. Erica looked at the screen for a few seconds and shook her head. She tossed the iPad aside and laid down on the bed, wondering what she was going to do next. Well, I do want to go, that's for sure, but what is he going to think? Her train of thought was lost when she remembered that she stopped thinking of what he thought of her the previous day. She got up from the bed and walked to the bathroom and turned on the water, before she took her clothes off. As she stood under the running water, she could feel herself feeling more and more inclined to the idea of visiting Venezuela, and by the time she was out of the bathroom, she knew exactly what she wanted to do.
Chapter 7. When Erica showed up at Daniel's suite with one of her bags, Daniel couldn't help but smile. He had seen this coming long before she had. He looked at her bag and shook his head. Is this it? He asked. I have 2 more in my room, she said. I'll send for them. Right now you need to have your passport handy because I booked us on a flight later this evening, he said. She looked at him and raised an eyebrow. I knew you would come around, he smiled. If she was not so happy at that moment, she would have been offended, but she didn't really care. She didn't mind stepping into the next chapter of whatever this was. But when they got to Caracas, Daniel had another favor to ask of her, a favor she wasn't so sure about. You know what would be really good? He asked. She shrugged and shook her head. What? I think that you being by my side would be a great idea, he said. She shook her head and shrugged. I don't know the first thing about this market, she said matter-of-factly. Well, you could be my legal advisor or something, he said. You own 30% of a company worth $30 million and you don't have legal representation? She frowned. He frowned and then smiled. Yeah, that's what I thought, she said. Come on, you'd be my muse in there, he teased. Really? Did you turn into Vince Van Gogh overnight? She asked, smiling. He looked at her and shook his head before he took a step forward. Okay, if I am 100% honest, are you going to come with me? Do a good job at convincing me and we'll see. Okay, fine. I have never come here without some kind of company, mostly lawyers or anyone. I need to go in there with someone, otherwise these damn Venezuelans will eat me alive, he said. But I don't even know what to wear or what to say. She started before he shrugged. We can always stop at a store on the way. We can get you everything you need, he said with a smile. She looked into his eyes and smiled as he pulled her close to kiss her. Fine, let's go, she said with a smile. He slipped an arm around her waist and walked her out to the car. She didn't remember the last time a man treated her like this. She was even more surprised when he took her to a clothing store. When she looked at the price tags, she wasn't sure she wanted to be there. But Daniel looked at her and handed the store clerk his credit card. You know you don't have to do that, right? She said as she looked at him. I brought you out here. You are my responsibility, he said with a smile. No, I'm not. She shook her head as she looked at him. What? I have to take care of my woman? Daniel said as he held her. She raised an eyebrow at him. Now I'm your woman? Well, I would like you to be. Is that a problem? He asked as he pulled her close to him and brushed her lips with his. She shook her head and smiled. She actually liked how that sounded. She looked at him and kissed him softly before she grabbed a dress from the racks and walked to the changing room. She smiled when she got to the changing room. What are you doing, Erica? You are acting like you are this man's girlfriend, she thought as she changed into the green dress she'd picked off the rack. She walked out of the changing room and looked at her reflection. She was still looking at her reflection when Daniel walked over to where she was. Not bad, he said in a low voice. Not sure those were the words I was going for, she said with a smile. He nodded and handed her an eggshell white dress. Try this on. I think you'll like it, he said with a smile before he let his hand slip to her ass. Daniel, we are in public, in South America, she said in a whisper. So? No one's watching or anything, he said as he looked at her. She looked at him and shook her head before she walked to the changing room again. She looked at the dress Daniel had handed her and smiled. It was perfect to say the least. She took off the green dress and put on the fitted white sleeveless knee-length dress before she pulled the side zipper up. Damn, she thought as she looked at her reflection. She especially loved the neckline beadwork that accentuated her perfect cleavage. The fitted dress even made her ass look bigger than it actually was. Or was it that her ass made the dress look especially good? Daniel had a smile on his face when she walked out. They might just give me the company when they see you, he said as she walked towards the mirror. The store clerk walked up to her and handed her a pair of blue red-bottomed peep-toe Louboutins. Oh my God! These are perfect, she said as she put on the shoes. They looked perfect with the white dress she had on. The way she had her hair in a tight bun made her look especially sexy. That is exactly what I wanted to see, he said in a low voice as his eyes went up and down her body. Really, it's not too much? She asked as she looked at him. Not at all, he smiled and signaled the store clerk to run up the bill. Do you have any idea how beautiful you are? He asked. Erica felt her cheeks flush as he looked at her. Stop it, she said, looking away. He held her chin and turned her to look into her eyes. No, Erica Hayes, I mean it. You are beautiful, he said in a soft voice as he looked at her. He lowered his head and kissed her softly. Now let's go and close that deal, he said before they walked out of the store. Erica could not really explain what she felt as she walked into the meeting on Daniel's arm, but when the meeting was done, she knew exactly what eye candy meant. The company representatives had been giving her a look that made her feel like she was naked in a room full of men, and she knew that they were even more impressed when she offered her legal advice to Daniel every so often. By the time they left the meeting, all Daniel wanted to do was strip her and have his way with her, and she knew it too. She was rubbing her ass against his hand in the elevator, and even though they couldn't speak to each other while inside there, Daniel was giving her looks that gave her the exact picture of what he had in store for her. It was nice to see you again, Senor Reese. We're sorry for the confusion, Ramon Suarez, the company CFO, said when they got to the ground floor. I'm just glad it's all settled now, Daniel said as he shook Ramon's hand. It was nice to meet you, Erica Hayes, Ramon said as he kissed the back of Erica's hand. The pleasure was all mine, Mr. Suarez, she said with a smile before Ramon walked away. She took a step to her right, getting closer to Daniel as they walked. Her ass was brushing against his hand, making him grossly uncomfortable. He wanted to throw her on the floor right there and then. Don't do that, he said in a low voice as they walked out of the office building. Don't do what? She asked, as if she didn't know what he was talking about. You know what you're doing. You are teasing me, he said in a low voice. She looked at him over her shoulder and shrugged. She was intentionally swaying her hips, knowing that he was looking at her. She was about to open the car door when Daniel took a quick step forward and opened the door for her. She looked at him and smiled in gratitude before she got into the car. Daniel walked round the front of the car and got in next to her. The embassy, por favor, he said to the driver. He had a smile on her face as he turned and looked at Erica. maybe bringing you to the meeting was a bad idea, he said in a whisper. Come on, don't hurt my feelings, she said as she looked at him.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene references, Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 7, Love Scene 3.
Daniel held her tightly and planted a kiss on her shoulder. At that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He never wanted this vacation to end.
Chapter 8. Erica did not expect for her and Daniel to stay in Caracas for too long, but when she found herself going up the Avila Mountain on her 4th day, she realized that she had maybe deviated from her vacation plans long enough. Even though she was technically still on vacation in Caracas, she somehow thought that it would have been better if she just stuck to her own list of preferred destinations. When Daniel first suggested that they go up the mountain, Erica was not so sure how she felt about it. First of all, she was not a very outdoorsy person. The most she had ever done that would make anyone consider her adventurous was visit Mount Rushmore, and even then it was not her idea. It was one of those family things that you wish you could get away from, yet somehow you find yourself posing for photos at the very place you swore you would never visit. You are going to love it, trust me, Daniel had said. I'm telling you, this is a bad idea, trust me, she'd said, trying to get out of the whole thing. I think by now I have a pretty good idea of what your tastes are like, and I'm almost 80% sure that you will love Avila, he'd said in his defense. Erica raised an eyebrow. If you don't like it, I will give you a pass. What kind of pass? Erica asked as she looked at him. You can have anything you want from me for an entire day, he said. Just a day? She asked, a smile playing on her lips. A day isn't long enough for you? Fine, we can always do 2, he said, smiling. But if you like it, then I get the same deal. Deal? She nodded before she walked to the bathroom. She already had on a pair of neon blue jeans and a white sleeveless top. She braided her hair and held it together in a loose side bun, before she touched up her makeup and put on a pair of sandals. Ready, she announced when she walked out of the bathroom. Or wait, trainers would make more sense, right? She asked as she looked at him. No, you are perfect. I mean, I am wearing sandals too, right? He said with a smile. What kind of mountain climbing are we going to do? I mean, I am no pro climber, but I know for sure that sandals are not the way to go, she said. We are not doing the conventional mountain climbing, he said. What else are you not telling me? She eyed him suspiciously. Daniel walked towards her and slipped an arm around her waist before pulling her to him. You look breathtaking, he said in a whisper before he brought his head down to kiss her. She pulled away when his lips brushed hers and looked at him from his gray Echo t-shirt to his dark blue jeans. And you look awesomely hot, she said as she looked at him. He kissed her again. This time her hands were running all over him. She pulled back again and held the back of his neck. Remember, you get what you want if and only if I actually like this trip to Mount Avila, she said with a smile. So you didn't like that? He teased. She shrugged and he slid his hand down to her ass and cupped it. How about that? His voice was lower this time round. She looked into his eyes and pulled away from him, but he pulled her into his arms again. Are we ever going to leave? Or are you just going to stand here and make me strip you right now? She asked in a whisper. Now that you've said that, I kind of like that idea. He grinned. And she knew that he meant it too because she could feel his crotch pressing against her thigh. She looked at him and pulled back again before she grabbed her bag from the bed. We better get going or I will make you sit through mani-pedis and hours of chick flicks, she said as she walked towards the door. Daniel shrugged and followed her out. He was still giving her that look she knew a little too well as they rode in the elevator. We could still go back, it's not too late, he whispered in her ear. Let's just get this mountain business out of the way and then later I am going to show you the time of your life, she said in a low, seductive voice just as the elevator doors opened. She knew what that kiss earlier was doing to him, and she loved the fact that he was like butter in her hand when he was aroused. She was still smiling when they got into the car. The drive to the mountain wasn't long at all, but as soon as they got there, she understood why he thought that sandals were a good idea. She was looking at a cable car station at the foot of the mountain. She looked at Daniel and smiled at him. So that is what you meant when you said I didn't need trainers, huh? She said. He took her hand and led her towards one of the cable cars. She took a flyer from one of the attendants as they headed to their designated car. She looked at it and smiled. Experience the mountainous side of Santiago de León de Caracas. She stopped and looked at Daniel. Santiago de León de Caracas? That's the official name of Caracas, he said. Experience the mountainous side of Santiago de León de Caracas as we go up. Feast your sights on the leafy canopy before we descend back down behind the mountain towards the coast to the coastal city of Macuto, she read. Sounds interesting, she said as she looked at the flyer. It does, doesn't it? He said as they looked around. She looked at him as a loud announcement over a PA system notifying them that they were about to leave. She looked at him and smiled. You've been here before? She asked. Actually, I've always wanted to be here, but the last few times I've been here, it's like I never got the time. So we get to take the Virgin trip together, she said matter-of-factly as she rested her head on his shoulder. She looked around as they started the climb. She could not help but think of how much her sister would have loved this place. Even though she and Emily were born on the same day, they were extreme opposites. Emily was everything Erica was not. She had gone camping and hiked up the Himalayas just for fun. Erica never understood that. Her idea of fun was going out to a 5-star restaurant and spoiling herself with a good lobster every so often, or maybe splurge on a shopping spree. But as they went up the mountain, Erica almost understood her sister's love of nature. Seeing the mountain from so high made her feel like she was standing on top of the world. This is beautiful, she said in a whisper as they rode up. Daniel nodded. Yeah, it is, he said in a low voice. Do you know at some point the cable car service had been neglected for 2 decades? She looked at him and shook her head. No, I didn't know that, and why would the government allow such a lucrative thing to shut down for that long? Apparently, the cable car service and the hotel up ahead were both projects done during the dictatorship of Marcos Jimenez. It was a great thing. Perhaps the only good thing he saw through his rule, but when his rule collapsed, the whole project became neglected. Maybe the people saw it as a symbol of one of the most terrible eras of their lives, he explained. It's a good thing the project got restored, right? She asked as she looked around. I know, I would have hated to think that all this would go to waste. Apparently, the place gets more than 4,000 visitors a weekend. The place has been totally turned around. It has so much more to offer. Themed restaurants, an ice rink. I've been looking to get something similar going in the States. As an investor, of course, he said. She looked at him and shook her head. Really? Aren't you satisfied with supplying America with all the home appliances they need? Well, there is so much more money can do for you. I mean, that's the whole idea of investment, right? Having the money work for you? He asked. She looked at him and shrugged. She did have a number of investment options herself. She didn't even know or understand how she got herself into some of them. You're right. I own 40% of a bakery, and I don't even know how I got myself into it, she added with a smile. Bakery, huh? And do you bake? She smiled and nodded. I do, especially after a long day. Nothing calms my mind more than a nice, fluffy chocolate cake. I love the occasional pound cake too, but the frosting is what really gets me going, she said. This is a whole new side of you I am finding out, he smiled. Well, there is so much more to me that you are yet to find out, she teased. And I cannot wait to uncover each and every layer, he said in a soft voice. She looked into his eyes and smiled up at him. Maybe I can bake you something sometime, she said in a soft voice. And maybe I can make you pancakes sometime, Daniel said. He looked at her and shrugged. Well, that's the only thing I know how to make anyway, he added with a smile. She laughed as he planted a kiss on her forehead. She looked outside at the beautiful scenery as she took photos on her phone. Her sister would definitely want to see those photos.
Chapter 9. When they finally got down from the mountain, Erica had a rush like she had never had before, but she was also hungry. They had left the hotel without having any food. She noticed a man standing at a corner selling what looked like croissants. Oh, those look so good. She started as she walked towards the man. Daniel held her hand and pulled her back. Actually, I know just where we are going to get a perfect American snack, he said as he led her to the opposite direction. But they look so tempting, she protested. More tempting than a hot dog on a stick? He asked as he looked at her. Hot dog on a stick? Seriously, here? I picked up a few tricks last time I was here. As it turns out, Ramon's sister went to school in the States, and she picked up a few tricks while out there. So when she found this place down here, she was over the moon, he said, as they walked towards a small diner. Oh my God, I feel like I am right back at home, she said with a smile as they walked into the small diner and took a seat at the counter. This is so exciting, she said in a low voice. Daniel smiled at her as he placed their order. As Erica looked around, she couldn't help but notice how similar the diner was to the hot dog on a stick joints she knew back at home. Oh my God! Hot dogs, fries, large frizzy drinks? I'm definitely not feeling homesick, she said as she bit into a crispy French fry. I knew you would like it, he said as he looked at her. So, tell me about your sister? Apart from the fact that you are fraternal, what else do I have to know? He asked. She bit into another fry and shrugged. A whole lot, she said as she looked at him. For starters, I was the more laid-back one, have always been, really. She likes the outdoors and strange things like yoga and stuff. What do you mean strange things like yoga? Your body screams yoga and Pilates. It's hard for me to believe that you don't like it. No, I love yoga. I actually do yoga stretches twice a week. She smiled and shrugged. Daniel shook his head, confused. I don't get it. She smiled as she picked up her hot dog. What I mean is, she is the kind of person who would rather do unassisted water births and stuff like that, while I would definitely opt for an epidural, she explained. I don't even know how she ended up in accounts. Given her personality, I was sure that she would end up selling her homemade jewelry. Daniel looked at her and laughed. Accounts? Yeah. I think she only puts on formal wear because she can't go to work in weird tribal paint and beads, Erica said before she took another bite of her French fries. Oh, come on. Aren't you being a little hard on her? Daniel asked before he took a long sip of his cold soda. She shrugged and then took a sip of her own drink. No, I'm not. I love meat. She is 100% vegan. I mean, she loves tofurkey and soy meat. Honestly, I don't understand how she lives on that tasteless food. There is something she has in common with my sister, Daniel said. She looked at him and raised an eyebrow. The vegan thing. Actually, my sister is a vegetarian. Is there a difference? Erica asked. Well, a vegetarian can have some animal products like milk and eggs, but a vegan abstains from all kind of animal products. I had to learn the difference when I met one of my sister's friends. I was kind of into her. Ah, she said before she took another bite of her hot dog. What? He asked as he looked at her. She shook her head and shrugged. Nothing, I just said ah, nothing more. Well, I could have sworn I heard something in the ah. Maybe there was, she said as she took another bite of her hot dog.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene references, Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 9, Love Scene 4.
Erica. He started again before she pulled her hand away from him. She took another bite of her fries and looked at him as she took long sips of her drink. So, what are we going to do after Caracas? She asked. Daniel knew what she was doing. She was trying to get his mind off everything so that he could at least walk back to the car. And you can't go to work this time. It is purely for fun, she said. Look at who cannot get enough of me. He looked at her and smiled. Erica felt her cheeks flush. She had just told him that she wanted to spend more time with him without even realizing it. Damn. She never thought she would feel this close, this attached to anyone. Unless, of course, you have to go back. She started before he leaned in and kissed her, silencing her. I want to be with you. Pick a destination and we're there, Daniel said in a whisper. I can't really decide between two places, equally rich in culture and scenery. She started. He raised an eyebrow and shrugged. Just say it, Erica, he said, as a few strands of her hair fell out of place. Erica was thinking of Athens and Morocco at the same time. She didn't know what she wanted between the two. Athens, she said without thinking. Good choice, he said as he pushed her hair behind her ear. She smiled at him and took another sip. She couldn't wait for her next adventure with Daniel. It was almost 8 in the evening when they finally got back to Daniel's suite. She didn't expect that they would be out that late. She looked at the time and wondered if it was an appropriate time to call Emily. Chances were she was still at the office anyway, and Cassandra would probably be at the bakery catering to the people who walked in for coffee after work. She sighed and sat on the edge of the bed as she composed a new email to her sister and Cassandra. She just couldn't wait to share the photos of Mount Avila. So what am I supposed to say without sounding like I'm trying to rub it in? She wondered as she started the email. Hey guys, check out how I spent my day. Miss you guys. XOXO. She smiled as she began uploading the photos to the email. She thought the one sentence was enough to express her excitement without making her sound like a jackass. She looked up at Daniel as he walked into the room just as the last photo uploaded. Talking to your peeps at home? Daniel asked. What the hell was that? She eyed him curiously. Trying to blend in with you and your culture, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, you mean the fact that I'm black? Is that a bad thing? Don't ever do that again. Ever, she said with a smile as she looked at him. Well, you can't blame me for being excited that I have an African-American girlfriend, he shrugged. She looked up at him as her cheeks flushed. Girlfriend? What, too soon? He asked. She shook her head and opened her mouth to speak, but she had nothing. It was too soon, and after what had happened between him and Zoe and her and Eli, she didn't want to do anything that would see their whirlwind romance come to an end. Her gaze fell as she quickly clicked send on the email. He sat down next to her as she put her iPad aside. Erica, he called as he put his finger on her chin and lifted her face to her. I'm sorry, she started as she looked at him. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, he said as he looked at her. He placed a hand against her cheek and leaned in to kiss her. She closed her eyes and kissed him back. She felt his tongue seeking out hers as his other hand slowly went down her back. She pulled away and looked at him. There was a tingle going down her spine as he looked into her eyes. I guess someone is not into labeling, he said in a soft voice. It always ruins everything, she said. He touched the back of her neck and pulled her to him. Not this time, he said, before he kissed her forehead lovingly. She watched him as he looked into her eyes. He then got up and walked to the living room. She had a smile on her face as she climbed off the bed. She could not even wipe the grin off her face as she sat on the toilet to pee. Maybe he was right. Maybe labeling things was not such a bad idea. Have any ideas on what we should do later today? Dinner, maybe? She heard him call out from the living room. Maybe we should make travel plans first. I mean, we don't even know when we are leaving Caracas, she said as she flushed. Done and done. We will be on the 10 a.m. flight to Athens, Daniel said. He was now walking towards the bedroom. And where'd you go? I wanted to get my reward for you loving the trip up the mountain, he said, as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. She tugged at her hair and undid the bun in her hair before she loosened the braid, letting her hair fall around her shoulders. Coming, she said as she pulled her top off. She took off her pants and then her underwear before she tossed everything aside. Give me just a few minutes, she said as she started the shower. She stepped into the running water and rolled her head up, letting the water fall on her face. She reached for the shower gel and squeezed a generous amount on her loofah. She was not sure whether she was taking extra long in the shower because she was scared that Daniel had just called her his girlfriend after a little under 2 weeks, or the fact that she was not sure what she was feeling. She was confused. When she finally got out of the shower, she toweled down and lotioned up before she put on a bathrobe. Erica, need some help in there? Daniel asked as she brushed her damp hair. She walked out of the bathroom and looked at him. I'm here, she said as she looked at him. You took a shower without me? He asked, feigning hurt. She looked at him and gave him a sad smile. The bathroom is right there. You could have very well just walked in, she said as she sat on the bed. It's the VIP suite. The walls here are thicker than a fort, Daniel said as he looked at her. She shrugged and looked at her. Okay, something's bugging you clearly, he said as he turned to look at her. She tried to force a smile, but she couldn't. She looked at him and shook her head. Nothing's wrong. Daniel smiled and nodded knowingly. It's the girlfriend thing, isn't it? He said. She looked at him and opened her mouth to speak again, but she still couldn't bring herself to say anything. She had nothing to say. You don't have to consider yourself my girlfriend if you are not ready for it. In fact, let's just stop talking about this altogether, he said as he held her hand in his. She looked at him and smiled. That sounds good. She looked at him and smiled. That's what I love to hear, he said as he put his hand under her damp hair. Now come down here and let me have you, he added as he brought her head down and kissed her deeply.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene references, Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 9, Love Scene 5.
Chapter 10. To say that Erica was excited as she and Daniel left Caracas for Athens would have been a gross understatement. The truth was that she was ecstatic. She could not wait to be in a new place with Daniel. She suddenly wanted to pinch herself. Every time she thought about how happy she was with him, she wanted to pinch herself. She didn't like the fact that she liked him a bit too much. What about him drives me so damn wild? She wondered as she looked at a sleeping Daniel. They were a couple of hours away from Athens, and after almost 13 hours of flying, Daniel had given in to his primal need and snoozed off. What about him is so different? What makes me so crazy and so scared of having him in my life? She was not sure about anything anymore. Actually, what she was feeling was what her sister would define as being in love. She shook her head at the thought. All she knew was the fact that she was confused, a lot. She reached for the iPad she had stashed in the seat pocket and sighed. She needed to get everything she was feeling out. And the best way she knew how, the only way she knew how, was to write. She needed to write. For years, that was the only thing she could do that could actually ensure that she kept herself sane. She sighed when she remembered her detachable keyboard was in the luggage compartment above. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up slowly, careful not to wake Daniel. She pulled her bag from the luggage compartment before she got her keyboard. She put the bag back in the compartment and sat down wondering how she would start her entry. She looked at Daniel again as she sat down and sighed. Just like journalism club back in college, just put your thoughts down, she thought as she opened a new document. She looked at the screen and attached the keyboard, making a small computer from the two gadgets. Just put down your thoughts, my thoughts. What do I think about Daniel Reese? She was now drumming her fingers against the sides of her screen. 2 weeks ago, I met the one good man who... She stopped and read the line she had just typed. That just sounds corny, she thought as she erased it. She didn't know whether to be real or poetic. She wanted to express the confusion she felt. The crazy weird things she had going in her head, in her heart. She was just about to begin typing when a flight attendant passed by checking if everyone had their seatbelts on. She had been too engrossed in what she was doing that she had not noticed the seatbelt signal come on. She quickly buckled herself in and sighed. She found herself picturing the office back when she was doing mediation. She would tell her clients to look at each other and speak from the heart. Maybe that was exactly what she needed to do. Look at Daniel and speak from the heart. She turned and looked at Daniel. She could not help but smile when she looked at him. He had beautiful long eyelashes that made her conclude that he would father some beautiful girls someday. The 3 stray hairs that usually fell out of place shielding his eyes were at it again. She looked at him, and suddenly it all dawned on her what she wanted to say. They say that all good men are either married or gay. Well, as it turns out, I may have just met the one good man who isn't married, gay, or held down by anyone. He is a gentleman, and he is good-looking, and I know the one question I should be asking myself is, what is wrong with him? Right? Well, I have been asking myself the same question for the last 2 weeks. Every time I look at him, I feel like there is something I am missing, something I am not seeing. Or is it that I am too infatuated with his perfect, gentlemanly personality that I cannot see what is right in front of me? She looked at Daniel again and smiled. Or is it that the universe is finally giving me something rather than taking something away? I could very well be falling for him and I don't even realize it, or I realize it and I am afraid of what I might be getting myself into. Eli was the same at first. Sweet, nice, and loving, and then he suddenly became this lying, cheating bastard. I gave him everything. My heart, my love, my all, and he swung shit at me. I'm scared of giving in to what I am feeling. What if I give in to everything and then I end up in the same position I was in with Eli? What if I admit that I have feelings for him and he hurts me? I can't take another heartbreak. She didn't know how she had gone from writing about Daniel and how he made her happy to Daniel and his potential to hurt her. She couldn't let this happen. Not again. She looked at him and slipped her hand into his, making him stir a little. She leaned back against the seat and rolled her head to the side as his eyelids fluttered open. "Hey there," he said in a low voice. She smiled at him. "Hey," she said in a whisper. "Sleep okay?" "As well as I could manage," he said with a smile. He turned on the plane navigation and smiled. "We're almost there," he said as he looked out the window. She nodded and turned off her iPad before she detached the keyboard and stashed it in the seat pocket. "What? The in-flight entertainment wasn't good enough?" he asked. "Kind of. I just needed to make a journal entry," she said. "You journal?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at her. "What is that supposed to mean? You made it sound like it was such a big idea. In a bad way." She frowned. He shook his head and straightened his back against the seat. "No, what I meant was that you don't look like the kind to journal. You look like a shooting range kind of person. There is a lot you are yet to find out about me," she said. "But you are not so far off as far as the shooting range is concerned." Daniel's eyes lit up. "So I was right about that? You like guns?" "Actually, Emily is more of the shooting range kind of girl. She actually has a gun collection. Beats me why she needs a collection of firearms," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You are kidding, right? I mean, you are familiar with the Second Amendment, right?" "Yes, I am, but she has a collection. Almost 3, she said, matter-of-factly making Daniel laugh. "What? What's so funny?" she asked as he looked at him. "Well, when you said collection, I was picturing something like this," he said as he reached for his phone from his pocket. She waited as he scrolled through the pictures to show her a photo of a room literally lined with firearms. "Whoa," Erica said under her breath. "Why the hell would you even need so many of these anyway?" she asked as she looked at the guns. "Well, I like to consider myself an enthusiast, really. See that?" he asked as he pointed at one of the firearms on the wall. It looked old school. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought it to have been used in the Civil War. "That's a .73 cal pistol. It was used in the American Civil War," he said. She smiled in satisfaction. At least she was not completely oblivious as far as firearms were concerned. "That's definitely a beaut, I can say that for sure," she said as she double-tapped on the screen to enlarge the photo. "I'll make a gun enthusiast out of you, Hayes," he said as he looked into her eyes. "I have been dodging my sister on that for most of my adult life. I'm not sure how successful you are going to be in that," she said, just as the captain announced over the system that the passengers should prepare for landing. "I don't know about that," he said with a smile. "If you had told me a month ago that I would be traveling the world with a woman who would take my heart captive, I would have most probably laughed in your face. So you coming to see the other side of firearms like I do is definitely a possibility," he said as he lifted the window blind as per the flight regulations. She looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "Take your heart captive? Really? Out of all that, that's all you got?" "I can't help it if some words you speak totally catch me off guard," she shrugged. "You almost sound like an actor on some Shakespearean play or something." He looked at her and took one of her hands in his. "Guess that's the effect you have on me," he said before he looked out the window. "Say hello to Greece," he said with a smile. She looked out the window and a smile played on her lips. The perfect blue of the water and the white of the buildings was more than enough to send a warm tingle down her spine. The small specks of luscious green vegetation was a welcome sight contrasting the white and blue. She was going to love her time here. She was going to cherish her time here. "I have always wanted to ask," Erica started when they had booked themselves in at the hotel. Daniel looked at her and laughed. "Now what?" Erica asked, rolling her eyes. "Nothing," he said, shaking his head as he walked towards her. Erica sat on the bed and crossed her arms over her chest, feigning a frown. "You just laughed at me and you are telling me that it's nothing?" "There is definitely something," she said, moving back on the bed so she could rest her back on the headboard. "Fine, I'm laughing at what you said, not at you," Daniel said. "What did I just say?" she asked, looking at him. You just said you've always wanted to ask me. Like you've known me since college or something, he said, joining her on the bed. She smiled as he draped an arm around her shoulders. Well, maybe it feels like I have known you since way back then. And even if I did, what's the biggie? She asked. Daniel shook his head and planted a kiss on her forehead. No biggie. So what have you always wanted to ask me, Miss Hayes? Why are you on this long vacation? Have you grown tired of me already? He asked, looking into her eyes. She smiled and playfully punched his arm. Oh, silly. It's just... Her voice trailed off when she realized that there was no polite way of asking what she was about to ask. It seems like you are in no hurry to get back home, considering that by the time I met you, you'd already been MIA from your daily routine for almost a month, she said. He looked down at her and took a long, deep breath. It's a long story. At the risk of sounding cliched, I've got nothing but time, she said. Unless, of course, you don't want to talk about it, she added quickly. Daniel shook his head and ran his fingers through his hair. Erica could tell that she had pushed the wrong button. Maybe I shouldn't have pushed it, she thought. Wait, did you take off because of what happened with Zoe? Not exactly, but it had a lot to do with her, he sighed. Daniel was breathing hard as he looked at the company's quarterlies. There were certain days in the year he hated, and this was slowly turning out to be one of them. As far as he was concerned, the company should have been making profits, and not just mere profits, but a shitload of profits. And judging by the financial report he had in his hand, QKM was in the hole, a very dark financial hole. He ran his fingers through his hair and loosened his tie before he slammed the report on his desk. He leaned forward and ran his finger on the edge of the telephone, before he finally pressed the intercom button. Susie, get me Procter & Wells, now! He was yelling, even though he never meant to. He walked over to his minibar and poured himself a whiskey, neat. He flashed down the contents of the glass before he poured himself another glass. He had just put the bottle back down when he heard a knock on the door. He walked back to his desk as Micah Proctor and Spencer Wells walked into his office. You wanted to see us, Mr. Reese? Spencer asked. Yeah, I did. Come on in, guys, and explain what the hell those financials mean, he said as he put the file in front of the two men from the accounting office. He took a seat and ran his finger around the rim of the glass. He could feel his heart beating hard in his chest, and he knew that after years of working with his team, Procter & Wells knew exactly what he was thinking. Well, Daniel pressed as he took a sip of his drink. He had no idea what kind of shitstorm his question was about to raise. He looked at the two and wondered what kind of lies the two would cook up. Well, to be honest, Mr. Reese, Spencer started, we've been looking into getting more turnover. Daniel looked at them and shook his head. That sounded like good news, but the way Spencer was talking made him think that there was something more.
We might have made the wrong choices as far as stocks are concerned, he said.
Daniel rubbed his temple and took another sip of his drink. He could not believe what he was hearing. And whose idea was this exactly? He asked. Wells and Proctor exchanged a knowing glance. Well, it may have come right from the top, Proctor said. What do you mean right from the top? Did my father do this? Daniel asked as he looked at the two of them. He noticed the knowing look between his two accounting guys and rubbed his temple again. Guys, if there is anything I need to know, I would like to know right now, he said. Patrick Reese, Spencer said after a long silence. Daniel took a long, deep breath. Patrick was his uncle and his father's younger brother. When Daniel took the reins at QKM, he was one of the most vocal people against the move. As far as he was concerned, he was next in line, and Daniel taking over as CEO only meant one thing, that he had been robbed of his birthright. What the hell? He doesn't have a say in this, not in the very least. Daniel was annoyed. He was sure that this was a way for his uncle to undermine his leadership. He'd been doing it ever since his father named him successor, and even then, Daniel knew that there would never be a time when his uncle's idiocy got to him, but somehow it did. He flashed down the contents of his glass and closed his eyes tightly as he felt the whiskey burning its way down his throat. We tried everything we could, but we had no idea how we were supposed to approach any of this. There was too much at risk. Proctor was now talking. What do you mean? What kind of risk are you talking about? He asked, confused. Proctor and Wells looked at each other again. Did you know that Zoe Willoughby bought him out of QKM? Proctor asked. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What? He asked in surprise. Zoe Willoughby, as in my ex Zoe Willoughby? That Zoe? He asked. Proctor nodded. Daniel knew what this meant. Wait, when did Zoe Willoughby get QKM stock? Why wasn't I in the loop? Daniel asked, more confused than ever. He knew one thing for sure. If Zoe got her hands on his company's stock, then she must have had an ulterior motive. She was never one to do things just for the sake of doing them. Honestly, Mr. Reese, we didn't think much of it until now, Proctor said. Yeah, and we have never had reason to question the motive of any new stockholder. To us, it was just another investment, Spencer said. But Uncle Patrick is still on the board, he said matter-of-factly. Normally, if a member or the board sold off his shares, then he had to give up his seat on the board. There was no logic to a board member sitting in on meetings in a company he had no business with. Yes, he is, but if I could speak freely, sir, I would say that Patrick Reese is Miss Willoughby's proxy, Spencer said. Proxy for what? He asked as he looked at them. And why the hell hasn't this ever come up? Daniel asked. This had to be the best-kept secret next to Area 51. When no one questioned the change, we thought it was some high-level shit. We were not about to step in something we were not welcomed in. Excuse my French, sir, Proctor said. But there is no way my uncle would just hand over his shares without a fight. There is something more to this than meets the eye, he said, a faraway look in his eye. Spencer looked at Proctor and shrugged. I mean, he did fight tooth and nail to get his hands on that stock after all, Daniel added as he looked at the two guys who he had once considered his A-team. There was something off and he could feel it in his bones. He rubbed his brow with his index finger and sighed. Get me the company's financials going back 2 years. There is something more to this, stock handover, and I am going to get to the bottom of it, he said as he leaned back in his chair. Proctor and Wells looked at each other and nodded before they got up. Hey guys, I need that report ASAP, he said. I'll have it back here in 10, Proctor said before the two walked out. Daniel took a long, deep breath as he looked at his phone. He had half a mind to call both his uncle and Zoe. He needed to know what the hell those two were up to. He had a sick feeling about all this. There was no way that his two least favorite people working together was a coincidence. There was something more to it, and he was going to find out. He was not sure how long he had been staring at his phone when Proctor finally came through. Something's a little off, boss, he said when he placed the report on the desk. Why? Daniel asked as he grabbed the file off his desk. Proctor shook his head. The accounts guy was a little reluctant. Matter of fact, he only did it because I dropped your name, he said. Daniel looked at him and raised an eyebrow before he flipped through the pages. This was going to take a while. He looked at Proctor and smiled. Thanks, Proctor. I'll take a look at this and get back to you, he said as he put the file back on the table. Don't mention it, boss, Proctor said before he started walking towards the door. Proctor, at the risk of sounding like a CIA agent, this is strictly need to know, and I determine who needs to know, Daniel said. Proctor smiled and nodded. Make sure Spencer knows that too, he added before Proctor walked out of his office. He looked at the report and sighed before he picked up his phone. He dialed 2 and pressed call. Julian, how are you doing? He said when his private forensic accountant picked up. Good, but I'm guessing that is not the case for you, Julian said. Daniel smiled and nodded as if Julian could see him. Saw right through this call, didn't you? Yes, I did. So what's going on? Julian asked. Well, I need to see you. Can we meet somewhere? I don't think I should be discussing this over the phone, Daniel said. How about we do coffee in 10? Sure. Same place? Julian asked. Same place, Daniel said before hanging up. Something was up and he was going to get to the bottom of whatever the hell Zoe and Patrick were up to. After his meeting with Julian, Daniel was more rattled than he had ever been. He could not wait to look his uncle and Zoe in the eye when he called them on their bluff. This was a new low even for them. His heart was beating hard in his chest as he slowly walked into the boardroom. His father looked up at him and smiled. Daniel, are you going to tell me why we are here? He asked as Daniel sat down. Give it a minute, Dad, Daniel said, smiling at him. Ray looked at his son and shrugged. He'd been out of the QKM mainstream business for a while, and board meetings were the only time he showed up at the company. And now, for this thing his son had called him in for. Right on time, Daniel said under his breath as Zoe walked into the boardroom followed by Patrick. Ray raised an eyebrow. Pat, Zoe, what the hell is going on? Daniel looked at the two and then at his father. Always good to see you, Ray. Retirement suits you. You look really good, she said with a smile. Daniel, Zoe added in a sarcastic tone. Thanks, Zoe. Good to see you too. What's going on? Ray asked as he looked at the two of them. Daniel stood up and passed copies of the report he had in his hand. What's this? He asked. Those are the company's financials for the last year, Daniel said. Ray raised an eyebrow and shook his head. What the hell? We are losing thousands daily. Zoe tossed the file on the table and shook her head. Is this why you called us in here? To tell us what we all know? She asked. Hold on there. I did not know we were incurring this much in losses, Ray said. That is not what I meant, Ray. All I meant was that businesses make losses, she said matter-of-factly. Yes, Daniel, that is why there are balance sheets with profits and loss accounts, Patrick said. Daniel shook his head. That's not the point. Look at page 2 of the report. It clearly states that we have all the raw materials needed for the next 6 months. Yet Uncle Patrick signed the release to procure more materials, Daniel said. Ray looked at his brother and shook his head. Pat, what the hell? Ray, I can explain. Patrick started before Daniel held up a finger. And Uncle Patrick sold off his shares to Zoe, he said. He could tell by the way Zoe's eyes grew wide that he had taken her by surprise. She looked at Patrick and then at Ray. Now, Ray, Zoe started before Patrick also spoke up. I can explain this, Ray, he said. Why didn't you tell me that you wanted to sell your shares after badgering me that much? Ray asked as he looked at his brother. Patrick shrugged. I needed money, Ray. You are a shareholder at a Fortune 500. How much money could you possibly have needed? Ray asked. Dad, that's not why I called us here. Our newest product has a number of tweaks, just a way to give us an edge in the market, Daniel said as he switched on the projector. This is our model, and this, he paused as he changed the slides. That's our lead competitor's newest model, he added. That's the same microwave we have in our line, inside and out, Ray said. He looked at his son and shook his head. Why on earth does our lead competitor have the very same product we have? Doesn't our R&D department put enough into their work, or what the hell is going on? He asked. I hired a forensic accountant to find out why we were having these losses, and apart from finding out what Uncle Patrick was doing, he also traced a money trail back to Zoe, Daniel explained. From the way Zoe's nostrils were flaring rapidly, he could tell that she was nervous. A trail that led right up to Kitchen Depot. Zoe has been leaking our R&D designs to our competitor, he added. Ray looked at Zoe and then at Patrick. You knew this was happening and you never said a word to me? He asked. Ray, listen, Patrick started. According to the company bylaws, any board member who defies the confidentiality clause has to walk away from the table, and his shares are sold to the other shareholders at half price, Daniel said. Wait, what? Zoe asked in surprise. Hey, that's not fair, Patrick started, but Ray was already on his feet. I want you out of the building right now, he said to Patrick through gritted teeth. Ray, you have to give me a chance to explain everything, Patrick said as he looked at his brother. Do I have to call security? Ray asked. Listen, Ray, Zoe started. You too. And if you know what's good for you, you will not contest this, otherwise I will take you for everything you have, Ray said, surprising everyone, including himself. He had always had a soft spot for Zoe, but the way she was acting right now, he didn't have any heart left for her. Ray looked at Zoe and Patrick as they walked out of the door before he sat back down. We need to do some major damage control, he said, looking at Daniel. Get everything under control and get the mole out of the R&D department. We need to start over, he said. I'm on it, Daniel said as he picked up his laptop and walked out of the boardroom, leaving his father seated there wondering how his bother could have double-crossed him like that. Good move, Danny, he heard Zoe's voice when he walked out of the boardroom. He turned to his side and saw her leaning against the wall. She looked at him and flashed him a smile that would have once melted his heart. Why the hell are you trying to run me down, Zoe? What were you thinking? He asked as he looked at her. You really don't know? She asked as she pushed a curl of her red hair behind her ear. No, I really don't, Daniel said as he looked at her. You fucking left me, she hissed. I don't have the time for this, he said as he walked down the hall to his office. You have to talk to me, Danny, she said as she walked quickly after him. She followed him right past his assistant and slammed the door when they were both inside. It's been long enough, she said as she looked at him. All I need to know is why you are trying to ruin my father's legacy, he said, looking into her once warm eyes. You hurt me, Danny. You just left me without giving me a chance to explain. She started before he laughed cynically. What was there to explain? We were supposed to get married and you cheated on me, he said. I deserve better, he added as he walked to his desk. You don't even care what made me do what I did? She asked. Daniel looked up at her in surprise. What? You actually have a reason for your infidelity? It was more of a statement than a question. You were never around, always working, and he... Her voice trailed off. She looked at him and he shook his head in disbelief. So what? You thought you'd get back at me by running the company my father struggled to build to the ground, is that it? Your big revenge plan? He asked. I actually wanted to control the majority of the company. I still do, she said. Why? Is that some crazy plan of yours to own me in some way? He asked. He laughed cynically when she didn't answer. That had been her plan all along. He looked at her and shook his head. Get out, he said as he picked up the phone. Annalise, get security up here right now. Zoe looked at him and shook her head. Come on, Danny, we were supposed to be the power couple to run QKM together, she asked. That was before you opened your legs to another man, he said in a low voice. She looked at him and began walking towards his desk slowly as she took off her coat. What the hell are you doing? He asked when she dropped her coat to the floor. Showing you what you are missing out on, she said in a low voice as she undid the buttons on her blouse. Daniel picked up the phone again. Annalise, he said in a warning tone. They're on their way, his assistant said in a soft voice. Zoe was already taking off her shirt. I don't want any of this, Zoe. I'm done with you. I have been for a long time, he said. She shook her head and kicked off her shoes just as security barged in. We are fine in here, aren't we, Danny? Zoe said with a smile. Mr. Reese? One of the security men said as he looked at Daniel. Get her out of here, Daniel said as he looked at the two security men. Erica looked at him and shook her head. She really didn't know what she was supposed to say. Daniel's story sounded like some well-scripted TV show, to say the least. She was still having a hard time processing everything that Daniel had just said. So, as you can see, I'm in no hurry to get back home. There's nothing for me back there anyway, he said. Don't say that. You have an entire business empire to run, she said. It's running quite well without me. And if I have to be there for business to run, then I have failed my father and my father's father and his father before that. Well, you get the drill, Daniel said. Erica laughed and nodded before she rested her head on his chest. She could not help but feel sorry for him after hearing all that. So she really wanted to clean you out? Erica asked. Honestly, I don't know whether she wanted to own the company or just get it shut down. I mean, if she wanted to run it so much, why the hell was she giving leverage to the competitor? Daniel wondered. So that's why you decided to go to Mexico? Erica asked. Well, I needed a fresh start and I needed a breather from the whole corporate field after that fight with those two clowns, he said. I hope you got it, Erica said in a soft voice. Daniel raised her chin and planted a soft kiss on her lips. In more ways than one, he said in a soft voice.
Chapter 11. After Erica and Daniel had their long heart-to-heart, they fell asleep in each other's arms, probably sleeping off the fatigue of the long flight. The loud vibrating of her phone is what woke both of them up. Is that mine or yours? Daniel asked. She opened her eyes and rolled her head to the side to see her phone lighting up on the nightstand. She sighed. It's mine, she said as she reached for the phone. She looked at the screen and then rubbed her eyes. Em? What the? She muttered as she picked up the phone. Hello? Emily? What's going on? Get to a computer or an iPad or just Skype your phone right the fuck now, Emily was yelling. Are you okay? Erica asked. Please just get on Skype. I need to vent, Emily said. Now? Erica asked. It was 11 in the morning, which meant that it was probably 3 or 4 in the morning back at home. Yes, now. I wouldn't be calling if I wanted to talk tomorrow, now, would I? Emily was clearly not having a very good day. Erica shrugged and rolled her eyes. You better not have rolled your eyes at me, Emily said. Erica wanted to scream. It was like she was right there. I didn't, Erica whispered loudly. I'll call you in a minute, she said before hanging up. Daniel looked at her and caressed her leg gently. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, it's just my sister. I need to Skype her, Erica said as she climbed off the bed. She walked to where her luggage was and pulled her iPad out. She then walked back to the bed as she switched it on. Do you know what the Wi-Fi password is? She asked as she sat on the bed. Daniel stirred. It was on the care package we got from reception, he said. Where is the care package? She asked. Daniel's eyes fluttered open as she looked around the suite. She spotted the care package on his suitcase. Never mind, she said as she climbed off the bed. She walked over to his suitcase and pulled out a flyer. She quickly looked through it before she keyed in the password and then placed the call to her sister. Okay, Em, what the fuck? She asked as she sat down in the couch. Well, I was looking at the... Emily started before Erica squinted. Wait, are you still at the office? She asked. Emily put her hands up and rolled her eyes. Will you just listen to me for a second and know this is my living room floor? I've been working from home since I got home from work 5 hours ago, she said. 5 hours ago? Erica asked. Yes, I got home at 11, Emily said as she sat on the floor. So anyway, I just lost everything, Erica. Every fucking thing, she said. Erica wanted to ask what her sister was talking about, but she knew better than to interrupt her sister when she was on an emotional roller coaster. She looked at her sister and leaned back on the couch, waiting to hear what Emily had to say. One of my clients, Perkins Inc., she started. The cosmetologists? Erica asked. Yes, the cosmetologists. They have ruined me officially, she said. Will you just tell me what the hell happened? Erica asked. Well, as it so turns out, the CFO has been stealing from the company whose account I have been managing, she said. Erica raised an eyebrow. That's not good, she said. I know, and I have been looking through every last document I have trying to make sure I clear my name, and I finally did it. I have totally cleared my name and everything, Emily said. Then what is the big deal? Erica asked, a little confused. My boss actually thought I had a hand in all this. He gave me a suspension letter pending investigation. The company I have devoted my time to for 3 years thought I was in on a felony. Emily was a mess. Erica could see it in the way she was talking. So you cleared your name, right? What's the big deal? The suspension should be lifted any day now, Erica said. Emily shook her head. Can't, I won't, she said. I emailed my boss my resignation before I called you. You what? Erica asked. I cannot work for a person who can't believe in me, Erica, Emily said as she looked at her sister. Holy shit, Erica, what the hell did I do? She asked after taking a long pause. You stood up for what you believe in, Erica said with a smile. She noticed a tear rolling down her sister's cheek. Hey, no, don't do that, she said, wishing she could be next to Emily so she could give her a hug. I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do next. Word of my resignation has already hit the other firms, and now my stupid email won't stop buzzing, and I can't. I can't do this right now. I just can't. Erica took a long, deep breath just as Daniel was walking into the room. Everything okay? He asked. My sister is having a meltdown. She quit her job, Erica said in a whisper, even though Emily heard her. Who are you talking to? Emily asked. Daniel leaned over in the iPad camera's line of sight. Hey, I'm Daniel, he said with a smile, giving a little wave. Emily brushed off her tears. Hey, sorry, I'm a mess, she said, as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It's fine. I want to make a call, get us some food. Any preference? He asked. Surprise me, she said. Daniel smiled and walked over to the phone. Okay, he is hot. 4 million times hotter than that stupid freak Eli, Emily said. Erica smiled and shook her head. Shut up, she whispered. What? He is, have you looked at him? Emily asked. I have slept with him, so I know exactly what I am talking about, she said in a whisper. Emily laughed. Good. At least you are smiling now. I guess I needed that, Emily said. I think I need a breather, or something, she added, as Daniel walked back to where Erica was and mouthed, I'm going for a shower, before he blew her a kiss. Erica smiled and felt her cheeks flush a bright crimson. Why the hell are you blushing? She asked. Erica's smile disappeared almost as soon as it appeared. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, as she straightened herself up. Listen, do this. Get some rest, sleep in, and I'll call Cassandra and have her check in on you, okay? Just take it easy, sweetie, she said. Emily nodded and sighed. I love you, Erica said. She had said those words so many times before, but this time she felt like they had so much more weight. I love you too, Emily said. Erica smiled as she hung up. She put the iPad aside and held the side of her head before she stood up and walked to the bedroom. She was slowly taking off her clothes as she walked into the bedroom area of the suite. When she finally took off her panties, she walked into the bathroom, and Daniel turned around to look at her. He held his hand out, and she gently placed her small hand in his. Are you okay? He asked, as he wrapped his arms around her. She wanted to nod, but she found herself shaking her head. Want to talk about it? She brushed the wet hair away from her face and sighed. What happened anyway? It's a long story. Something about her former workplace, and CFOs stealing company funds. I just don't know how all that happened to her, Erica said. And I have always been with my sister. Well, I don't live with her, but she has always been close to me and everything, but now she needs me and I am in freaking Athens, she said sadly. Daniel turned her around and looked into her eyes. Tell me what you want, he said as he looked into her eyes. I don't want to leave, but I also don't want to stay here knowing that she is wallowing in her own self-pity. She tends to do that, she said. We could bring her over here? What do you mean? She is not like some luggage we can just haul over or anything. Maybe she would actually like it. She wouldn't like it. She would love it. Then that's settled then. Unless, of course, you don't want her here. She shook her head. No, I'd love to have her here. Well, maybe a few days out here could really do her some good, Daniel said. He looked at her and she nodded. It will definitely make her forget all about some weird people trying to ruin her. It worked for me, didn't it? He asked. Guess you're right, she said, before she grabbed the shower gel from the rack and handed it to him. Now, you get to caress my wet, soapy body after you get this all over me, she said in a soft voice. Daniel felt his cock get hard just by the way she had said those words. And no, you can't have me yet, she added as she turned around, presenting her ass to him. That is not helping at all, Daniel said as he felt his cock pressing into her ass. She smiled and reached for his ass. Or that, he said, closing his eyes. I know, and I love it, Erica said softly.
Chapter 12. Needless to say, Emily was over the moon when Erica told her that she would be joining them in Athens for a mini holiday. God knows that was all she needed after the week she'd had. When Erica and Daniel picked her up from the airport, she could not help but stare at Daniel. Emily Miranda Hayes, Erica said in a loud whisper. What? Emily asked, turning her attention to her sister. You are staring. It's rude, Erica whispered. Daniel smiled. So I'm thinking you are whispering because you don't want me to hear what you're saying? He said as he looked at Erica, who turned her attention to him. You heard all that? She asked. Daniel smiled and turned his attention back on the road, nodding. Clearly, she doesn't want you to see just how much she is into you, Emily said, leaning forward to get a better look at Daniel. As if you are not already close enough, was what Erica was thinking as she turned her attention to look at the road. I will throw you out of this car, Em, if you don't shut the hell up, she said. Erica, always the uptight one, Emily said. Daniel was trying hard not to laugh. I can see the clear difference between you two. I told you, just because we are twins, it doesn't mean that we are anything alike, Erica said. Thank God, Emily said, laughing. So, Emily, how was your flight? Daniel asked in an attempt to change the subject. Long but generally pleasant. These Arabian Airlines are really upping their game. I mean, even the food is top of the range, Emily said. Erica smiled and turned around to look at her sister. What, you actually liked the food they served on the plane? It was amazing. We had this absolutely awesome chicken and potato for lunch. Emily sighed dramatically. I have never had something so spicy and delicious at the same time. Who knew? Maybe I am done with American Airlines for good, she added with a smile. I know exactly what you're talking about. I flew with Qatar Airways once. I had to get one of their chefs on my personal bandwagon, Daniel said. Wait, you have your own plane? This one's a keeper, Erica. We can have a way to chauffeur our kids around, Emily said. Daniel laughed and shook his head. The company has a jet. I just like knowing that I can have the same quality food I had back there, he said. What did you fly with? Eddie had, Emily said. Erica raised an eyebrow. What happened to Virgin Atlantic till I die? That was the earliest flight out of the States. The only other flight earlier than that would have kept me waiting for 12 hours, and it would have taken me through 3 stopovers. For a 13-hour journey? That wasn't worth it, Emily said. So you are here for 5 days. What do you have in mind? Erica asked as Daniel pulled over in front of the hotel. The Herodotus? This is where you are staying? Emily asked as the valet walked over to the car and opened the car door for her. She stepped out and looked at the big, beautiful building. It's like the Greek Burj Khalifa, she whispered to herself as Daniel spoke to a bellboy. Erica walked round to where she was and took her sister's hand in hers. Come on, she said as she led them in. Seriously, what does this guy do? I mean, he did pay for my flight here and my stay. Emily suddenly stopped when they got to the elevator. Is he a drug dealer? Please tell me he isn't, she said in a whisper. I have better judgment than that. Give me some credit, Erica said. Emily frowned and shook her head. Considering the kind of ex you have. She never got a chance to finish her statement because Erica was staring daggers at her. She smiled and shrugged. Fine. So he isn't a drug dealer, she said as Daniel walked up to them. I'm sorry. I had to make sure everything was in order for your suite, he said as they stepped into the elevator. Emily raised an eyebrow. Suite? She asked. Erica looked at her and nodded. Business class hotel suites. I haven't binged like this since the company sent me out to that conference in Vegas last year, she said as they rode to her floor. Well, Erica didn't tell me much, but from the little she did, I think you deserve it, Daniel said with a smile. Emily looked at him and shook her head dreamily. Please tell me you have a brother, cousin, anything. I have a sister and a few cousins. Most of them are married, though, Daniel said. Emily rolled her eyes and Erica laughed. Of course they are. The good ones are always taken, Emily said. Daniel took Erica's hands and shrugged. I don't know. I thought so too until I met your sister, he said with a smile as the elevator doors opened. So, this is you, Daniel said, as he led them to a suite down the hall. It was just 3 doors down from their room. This is so gorgeous, Emily said when she walked into her suites. It was not as big as Erica and Daniel's, Erica noticed, but it was still so much bigger than the standard room. They were still checking out the room when the bellboy came up with Emily's bags. We'll leave you to freshen up. I mean, I'm sure after 13 hours you need some rest, Daniel said. Erica gave her sister a quick hug. Remember, 3 doors down, she said. Emily smiled and then laughed. I know, I heard it too. Exactly like the band. So we are going to be having dinner in an hour or so, but if you're tired. Daniel started before Emily shook her head. I have the rest of the evening to sleep off the fatigue. Besides, I am 7 hours off my schedule, Emily said. Erica raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes, I want to hear all about the new guy and what he is about, Emily said with a smile. Awesome. Then we'll see you in around 57 minutes, Daniel said as he looked at his watch. He then slipped an arm around Erica's waist and led her to their suite. Your sister is something else, he said when they walked into the room. I know, right? Erica asked. But I can't wait to get to know her more. She seems exciting, he said as he grabbed an apple off the fruit basket on the table. I can now see the whole gun thing, he said before he bit into the apple. She sat down next to him and rested her head on his shoulder. So we are now meeting family, huh? Are you scared? She asked. Daniel took another bite and looked down at her. Not at all. "Your sister is awesome. Maybe you should meet my sister just to even out the playing field," he said. She laughed and got up before she walked to the bathroom. She splashed some water on her face and then dabbed her face with a towel. She then decided to take a full-on shower. After all, Daniel had this whole thing about dressing up for dinner, and she was starting to like it. Plus, she couldn't wait to put on her new blue silk dress that Daniel had got her while they were still in Caracas. After her shower, she lotioned up and then put on the dress and coupled it with a pair of black peep-toe heels. She then put on her makeup and let her hair down. She loved how she looked, but when she walked to where Daniel was, his heart almost skipped a beat. He looked at her and shut his laptop before he stood up. "You look, whoa," he said, looking at her. She looked at him and smiled. "Thank you," she said. "And you are not dressed." He got up and slowly walked towards her. He was fighting everything inside his body because at that moment all he wanted to do was just screw her brains out while she was still in that dress. "After seeing you, I don't really want to get dressed anymore," he said as he looked at her. "We are supposed to be having dinner in 30 minutes, and my sister—" Erica started before he smiled at her and shrugged. "Let her be. You did point out that we do have 30 minutes. He looked at her and smiled. "And I get to have more time to look at you," he said in a soft voice as he looked at the short, silky dress she had on. She was almost calling out to him to tear her clothes off. It was short, showing off her perfectly long legs. "So what are we supposed to be doing now?" she asked. "We could watch a movie," he said. She shrugged and walked over to the refrigerator. "So that's a yes on the movie?" he asked. "Sure," Erica said as she took a look in the fridge. "How could you not tell me about this pâté sitting here?" she asked as she took a bakery box out of the fridge. "Oh, that was supposed to be for dessert later," Daniel said as she walked to where he was. "Dessert with you, alone," he added in a low voice. She handed him a fork and smiled. "You could always have your dessert before dinner," she said. Daniel looked at her and then at the box. "I'm a bit confused," he said as he looked at her. She opened the box and looked at the frosted treat inside. "Are we talking of the confectionery or you?" he wondered as he looked at her. She flashed him a seductive smile. "Just start with the cake, and then have your other dessert," she said as she scooped some frosting with her finger. "The person who came up with this is a genius," he said after taking the first bite. "What? The whole cake meets pie? It's the same as a cronut," she said as she looked at him. "Maybe it's just good old American greed," she added. He took a bite and raised an eyebrow. "Good old American greed?" "Well, someone wants a donut and a croissant, so they make it into one. Another one wants a cake and a pie, so they decide to put the batter onto dough and bake it," she said as she looked at him. "Don't you see it?" she asked. Daniel smiled and took a bite before he fed some to her. "I love how you have these little explanations for everything," he said. "Well, I did practice law for some time. Stalling is a tactic you learn," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow again. "Are you stalling right now?" "What do you think?" she asked. He was about to answer when the loud ringing of his phone interrupted the moment. She looked at him and scooped some more frosting as he hit ignore. "Hey, you can answer that, you know," she said. He shook his head and switched off his phone. He looked rattled. "Actually, I'd rather not," he said. She touched his arm in concern. "You really can, it's no prob." "Erica, I said I don't want to answer it, so quit it," he suddenly said in a louder voice than he intended. She looked at him surprised. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," she said as she started walking away. Daniel took a long, deep breath and pulled her back to him. "Erica, I'm sorry," he said as he looked at her. She shook her head. She had never thought his dark side would be this, well, dark. "Baby," he said as he looked at her. "Talk to me." "Who was that?" she asked as she looked at him. "I don't think you really want to know," he said. "Fine. Whatever," she said as she tried pulling away from him. "It was Zoe," he said when he noticed that she was hell-bent on getting away. "That was Zoe, and I don't know how she got my number," he added. She didn't know what she was supposed to say. "I can't. I just don't." She started before he pressed a finger on her lips. She looked at him and opened her mouth to speak. "Zoe makes me angry. I mean, the very thought of her just drives me insane, he said as he pulled her to his body. She looked at him and shrugged. I think there is that one person who does that to us, she said. But you can't speak to me like that. It scares me, she added in a soft voice. He lowered his head and kissed her softly. I'm sorry, he said in a soft voice. I'm really, really sorry.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene reference is Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 12, Love Scene 6.
She loved how she felt like she belonged with him, something that she hadn't felt in a long time.
Chapter 13. For the next few days, Emily, Erica, and Daniel were all over Athens' hotspots, taking in the sights. Erica loved the fact that her sister was having a good time, getting everything off her mind. This was actually the first time she had taken any time off that year, and Erica was happy that she had made it happen. When they got back to the hotel from the Parthenon, Daniel was just glad he was back in the suite with Erica. He thought she looked especially lovely in the white flowered halter dress she had on. Throughout the day, he had tried not to grab her and press her against a wall in one of the crevices. He wouldn't have cared whether he would have had an audience as he had his way with her. He was almost happy that Emily had just 2 more days before she went back home. They had made a choice to just have room service rather than go down for dinner that evening. Erica thought it was partly because Emily wanted to take advantage of the hotel spa, but she didn't mind. A nice quiet evening in Daniel's arms was all she needed. I feel like I have hardly got to see you this week, he said as he looked at her when they walked into the suite. On the brighter side, we have visited almost every single thing that we have to do out here. I guess we are good, Erica said with a smile. I mean, the museums, the Acropolis, Parthenon. I wouldn't do anything differently, she said with a smile. Daniel pushed her against the wall and looked at her. Really? Even if it means you and me not having some quality time? He asked in a low voice. She looked at him and smiled. I think that is definitely something to consider, she said in a low voice. What do you mean something to consider? You make me feel like this is some kind of favor you are doing me, Daniel said. She held his face in her hands and kissed him softly before she pulled back and looked into his eyes. You are trying to make me sad, aren't you? She asked, a soft look in her brown eyes. Her smile slowly faded as she looked at him. Her hands slowly dropped down to his chest, and he put his hands on her waist, pulling her close to him. Some of his hair fell out of place and shielded his eyes. She always loved it when that happened. She brought a hand up and gently swept the hair from his eyes. By the way she was looking at him, he could tell that she had something in mind. What? He asked as he looked at her. She bit her lower lip and shrugged. I know there is something in that pretty little head of yours. Aw, you think I'm pretty, she said, smiling. He shook his head and then took a step forward, holding her close to him.
Oh no, this adult scene has been taken out and is exclusively available for Romancely Premium members. Check the description below to sign up. The love scene references Her Next Man's a Billionaire, Chapter 13, Love Scene 7.
I shouldn't have done that, he said with his eyes closed. The honest truth was that Erica was freaked out too, but if she showed it, then they would have been 2 freaked out people. 2 blind men leading each other to a ditch. She forced out a smile and pressed her lips to his forehead, mostly to hide the fact that her lips were now quavering. We'll be okay, she said in a soft voice. She looked at him and suddenly adored his perfectly big eyes. We'll be okay, she said again, even though she was sure that was not the mindset she had. Her heart was beating hard in her chest, and she was almost too sure that she was hyperventilating.
Chapter 14. Erica had no idea how long her post-coital nap with Daniel had lasted by the time she finally got up. She looked at Daniel, who was still sleeping, and slowly walked to the bathroom where she quickly got cleaned up. She then put on a t-shirt and a pair of shorts before she tiptoed to the living room. She pulled out a 10-euro note and then shrugged. Maybe it costs more, she thought before she pulled out a 50 and then another 50. She then put on a pair of flip-flops and walked out of the suite. She could feel her heart pounding hard as she walked towards the elevator. She had never had to take the morning after pill before. That was always Emily. As far as Erica was concerned, condoms had always been her first choice. When the elevator got to the ground floor, she looked around and tried to recall where she had seen the pharmacy. She could feel her palms sweating as she walked to the reception. "Hi, I'm looking for the drugstore. I saw it here somewhere." She started before the receptionist pointed to the right. "Second door, you can't miss it," the receptionist said with a smile in a heavy Greek accent. Erica walked to the direction she had been pointed to, and when she got to the door, she took a step back and took a long, deep breath. She then walked in and began walking up and down the aisles. When she finally got to the section she was interested in, she sighed when she noticed 4 different companies. What the hell? She wondered as she looked at the choices in front of her. She had absolutely no idea what she was supposed to be doing there. She sighed and grabbed all 4 packs before she walked to the counter. She noticed the weird look the cashier was giving her as she rang her up. €86, the cashier said. Erica handed her the 250s and began walking out. "Your change," the cashier called out when Erica got to the door. "Keep the change," Erica said before she practically ran out of there. She quickly made her way to the elevator. She walked into the elevator and took long, deep breaths. She was hoping that Emily was still in her room. When she walked out of the elevator, she walked straight up to her sister's room and knocked softly. "Please be in," she prayed quietly as she knocked again. She suddenly banged her fist on the door a bit louder than she had anticipated, and Emily opened the door. "Erica, what the hell?" she asked as Erica walked into the suite. She walked straight up to the couch and sat down. "What's going on?" Emily asked as she walked up to where her sister was. "I thought you were going to the spa," Erica said as she rubbed her hands together. I am. I was about to head out," Emily said before she sat down next to her sister. "What is it?" "You look like you need a drink or something," she said. "I do need a drink, a stiff one," Erica said. Emily stood up and walked to her minibar before she came back carrying 2 glasses of rum. "I'm all out of ice," Emily said as she handed Erica a glass. "Whoa there," she said when she saw Erica flashing down the contents of the glass. She barely had enough time to process what had just happened before Erica reached for her glass and flashed that down as well. "Okay, now that we have that out of the way, will you tell me what the hell is going on with you?" she asked as she took the glass from Erica and put it aside. Erica looked at her sister and then handed her the paper bag she got from the drugstore. "What's this?" Emily asked as she looked inside. What the hell is this? Did you... Emily was having a hard time understanding just what Erica was up to. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, which one I'm supposed to take." Erica started as she looked at her sister. "Wait, you went raw with Daniel? You've only known him for like 3 weeks," Emily said. "I don't need any judgment right now. All I want is to know which one I'm supposed to have," Erica said as she leaned back in the couch. "Okay, chill. For starters, you don't need every drug known to man out there," Emily said as she took one of the packets and handed it to her sister. "And thank God I just split a shot into 2 glasses," she added as she got up and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the minibar. "Have that, every last drop. You need to dilute that booze," Emily said as she handed Erica 1 bottle. "Thanks," Erica said as she took long gulps of the water. She looked at Emily and shrugged. "I'm sorry I'm freaking out, but all this is so new to me, and I have no idea how I am supposed to handle it," she added. "So how exactly did the ever-careful Erica end up here?" Emily asked. Erica rolled her eyes at her sister. "Okay, I'm really sorry if I am coming off as judgmental. I don't mean to. I'm just really surprised." "We were just catching up," Erica started. "Literally," Emily smiled. Erica looked at her and took another long sip of her water. "Yes, literally, and I guess things just spiraled out of control. We didn't even realize until it was too late." "And by too late, you mean?" Emily started saying, but Erica looked at her just in time, forcing her to cut her sentence short. "You know exactly what I mean," Erica said. She took another long sip and sighed. "What the hell have I done, Em?" she wondered out loud. "Okay, you have to snap out of it. You are trying to read too much into a situation that isn't even a situation," Emily said. "That doesn't make any sense," Erica sighed before she took another long sip. "Okay, I think you are freaking out because you like this guy and you are scared that it might be all about a rebound," Emily said. Erica looked at her and shook her head. I have known you all my life, Erica. You cannot bullshit me. Emily added with a smile as she lifted the bottle up to Erica's lips, forcing her to take another drink. The half-liter bottle was now a quarter full. Erica looked at Emily and sighed. Damn it, I'm so fucked, she said in a low tone. No, you're not. I like him. A lot, and you know very well that usually doesn't happen with me, Emily said, making Erica laugh. She took one last gulp and put the bottle down. So, from the way you are freaking out, I'm guessing you haven't DTR'd, she said. Erica laughed again. DTR? What are we teens? You know what I mean. When are you going to stop playing this god-awful game and just do it already? Emily pointed out with a smile. Erica looked at her and shook her head. I don't know whether I want to rush all this. Has he given you any sign that maybe he is into you as much as you are into him? Emily asked. Erica took a long, deep breath. He told me he loves me, she said in a whisper. Emily raised an eyebrow. Whoa, he sure works fast, she said with a smile. And you have been exclusive with each other for almost a month. Just take the pill and get him to the clinic just to make sure everything is okay, and then just sit back and enjoy the ride. Erica was still not convinced. She could not just sit back and relax. That was not who she was. That was not her M.O. But I am really scared. This could all be a mistake. This could all just be one big mistake, Erica said. Right now you are just feeling like this because the possibility of having little Daniel babies with beautiful green eyes is a possibility. But the truth is that you should not be freaking out, Emily said, as she popped a pill out of the pack she had handed Erica earlier. Have this. She gave Erica the pill and opened the other bottle of water. You are probably going to be nauseated and fatigued, so I recommend rest for the next 12 or so hours, okay? Erica nodded before she put the pill in her mouth and washed it down with the water Emily had given her. She put the bottle down and exhaled loudly. How did you ever do this? Erica asked. Do what? Emily asked, raising an eyebrow. This unprotected sex so many times. Erica began before Emily put a hand up. Hey there. You make it sound like I was just sleeping around with every Tom, Dick, and Harry, she said. Erica shrugged and Emily's eyes grew wide. Come on. It was a lot of unprotected sex with one person who I loved, she said. But the freaking out and everything? Erica asked. Oh, ye of limited knowledge. Ever heard of safe days? I trusted Finn and he trusted me. The emergency pill only came into play when we got a little careless and then I switched to the daily pill, she said. Erica shrugged. And yes, I did remember to take it every single day. So you never had a pregnancy scare? Erica asked. Emily shook her head. Never. Not once, she said, almost too proudly. The diaphragm was my next move before Finn and I parted ways. I have been seeing things your way for a while now, she added. For the first time since she walked into that room, Erica smiled and shook her head. Seeing things my way? She echoed. Emily nodded. I know you always thought that I was the loose one, but apart from Finn, I never really went raw with anyone else, Emily said. Erica looked at her and shook her head in surprise. 28 years, and this was the first time her sister was thinking of coming clean about such a thing. She raised an eyebrow. What? She asked in surprise. Yeah, I guess Finn was just the one, and when he went to Mayo, I guess I just felt like we couldn't survive the strain. And we didn't, Emily said. So all the other guys. Erica started, and Emily shook her head. Joe? Never even saw the color of my panties, Emily said. Erica laughed. Mickey? She asked. Got all the bases covered except the one, her sister said. Rudy? Erica asked as she looked at Emily. Each answer was surprising her more and more. Too German. His idea of phone sex was telling me how much he wanted to watch me take a shit, Emily said. Erica frowned and shook her head. That is my cue to leave, she said as she got up. Emily stood up and threw her arms around her sister. Thanks for talking to me. I really needed that, Erica said. Yes, you did. Just do what I told you. Take that trip to the clinic and just take a chill pill, Emily said as she pulled away. See you tomorrow? Brunch maybe? Erica smiled. Sounds great, Emily responded before Erica walked out of the suite. When Erica walked into her suite, Daniel was still asleep. She took off her shorts and tiptoed to the bathroom. After relieving herself, thanks to the waterboarding session her sister had given her earlier, She climbed back into bed and looked at her sleeping prince. Wait, did I just think of him as my sleeping prince? She wondered as she looked at him. She gently touched the side of his face, and his eyelids fluttered open. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you, she said in a whisper as she looked into his eyes. He gave her a groggy smile. That's okay, I like waking up next to you. Hungry? She asked. Not yet, he said as he moved close to her. She smiled and turned around before he draped an arm around her, and they both slept through the night. When she woke up the next morning, Erica's heart was pounding. After sleeping on it, she decided to take Emily's advice. Wait, where are we going? Daniel asked when Erica told him where they were going. Erica had just told him to get dressed and had just now told him where they were headed. She looked at him and nodded. We are going to the clinic, she said as she turned her attention back on the road. Well, you could have told me or something. I mean, I don't mind it and everything, but seriously, Erica, Daniel said as he looked at the road ahead. Wait, what happened? When we woke up, you were totally okay. Very much unlike last night, he said. Last night, I went down to the drugstore and got myself an emergency pill. Apparently, I am going to be really fucked up in a few hours, and I really want to get this clinic thing out of the way, she said. This clinic thing? You make it sound like it is some weird thing we have to get over, Daniel said as he looked at her. It is a dumb, weird thing we have to get over, Erica said. I mean, we are going to have our sexual lives literally opened up in front of each other, and I have nothing to hide, but you don't know where I've been and my ex. She started before she shook her head. You don't know where I've been either, he said in a soft voice. Yes, and that is why I have to do this. We have to do this, she said as she looked around. The hospital is supposed to be here somewhere, she said in a low voice. Right ahead, Daniel said as he pointed at a big building on their left. Erica pulled over in front of the building. So I'm scared. I'm really, really scared. I mean, I haven't had a checkup ever since I found out Eli was cheating and God knows what. She trailed off and he unbuckled his seatbelt before he leaned forward and gathered her in his arms. Why do I have a feeling that there is something more to this? He asked. She pulled away from him and looked into his eyes. Her eyes were glistening, and she knew that any time now, a tear would roll down her cheek. You told me you loved me and I didn't say anything, she said. I told you. You didn't have to say anything, he said as a tear rolled down her cheek. He used his thumb to brush it away. I'm falling for... No, I love you. I actually, honestly do love you, and it scares me because I haven't even known you for a month, she said. Daniel brushed off another tear. What if you... She never had a chance to finish her sentence. Daniel was kissing her deeply, seeking her tongue out with his. I am not Elijah, he said in a soft voice when he pulled away. It's just Eli, she smiled. Shut up, Hayes, you are ruining the moment, he said, making her laugh. Seriously, this is a clean slate for both of us, and I want that with you. She held his hand and smiled at him. I want it with you too, she said in a whisper. He got out and walked round the front of the car before opening the door on the driver's side. Let's just do this and start a new future, he said as he led her to the hospital's entrance. Maybe I can finally make you those pancakes I promised. She looked at him and interlaced her fingers with his. And I can promise you, they are pretty damn awesome, he added as they walked through the hospital entrance. A smile played on her lips as they walked to the front desk. Maybe Daniel and Emily were right. Taking a chill pill, sitting back, and enjoying the ride was exactly what she was going to do. The end.
If you want more billionaire romances like this, please, my love, be sure to subscribe to the Romancely YouTube channel. I look forward to spending more time with you. Subscribe and let's make it happen.